news articles as private, reclusive, mysterious, and a billionaire. But now you're back in the spotlight, in this room, on camera. Why?
I believe two things. I guess I was big in the 90s. And then in 2005, I got married and shut everything down. My last podcast, sort of prior to this, was in 2005. And so I was quiet for 20 years. My youngest is now a senior in high school, and she's going to be leaving. And so my next 20 years is all about transforming education, and I think we can transform it for 1 billion kids. And to do that, I have to get out there and explain why it can be awesome for kids around the world. Like the co-founder of Alpha, McKinsey, she says, this is the best time in history to be a 5-year-old. Mm-hmm. And we totally believe that. And we need to go out and build that and make that happen.
Was there just no point to be in public beforehand? Like too much hate on the internet, not fun? You just like working with computers?
Well, I'm definitely naturally an introvert. And if I have a choice of just sitting inside, I definitely would do that. The other was just for family. I didn't want my family to grow up in that environment. And I wanted to make it as normal as I could for my kids. It's not quite normal, but not being in the press all the time makes it a lot easier. The other thing I got that happened in 2005, I got Forbes to take me off the list. So I was on the list in all the 90s, the rich list, and I got them to take me off.
How?
And so, well, there was a dot-com turn down, and so they were all like, oh, and if I don't give them data, right, then all of a sudden they're like, oh, okay, you must have lost all your money. I'm like, yeah, totally. And so then they found out later and put me back on it. And I had to sit down with my 2 daughters, and I'm like, kids, I hate to tell you this, but I've been lying to you. We actually have more money than we think, and it's gonna go out next week, and you're gonna see that we have more money, because I had basically been trying to have them grow up in a world where it wasn't surrounded by, billionaire kind of stuff.
Yeah, smart. I was just with another friend of mine, Jenny, who is also, a Billy. But she was saying last night, she was like, we purposefully never put out how much we were worth, which I think for young people, they're like, why not? Where are the Raris? Where's the planes? But I think that's also often an indicator of perhaps not everything's very great if you're having to demonstrate that as your indication of wealth. So do you think for young people, or if somebody's listening to this, should you try to look poor? Is it a negative signal to actually focus on projecting wealth?
When I look at kids' motivation, and students' motivation, right? All our schools are about what motivates students, and parents, like it or not, what motivates kids? Kids want to be influencers. They want to be famous, right? They want to be athletes. They want to be star athletes, right? They also want to be rich. Right? Those are all dimensions that drive kids' motivation. And, you have one where when you get wealth, you're often like, oh, honey, or, son, that's not really that good. And it's hard, right, for the kid to be like, no, I want to go prove myself. I want to go do this. And so I believe it's just an intrinsic motivation in a lot of kids, and that you need to teach them the right way, right? There's all these great character building and life skills you can teach under that to get the habits you're looking for, right? In our schools, we start teaching about money in kindergarten, right? And so we have a whole financial literacy program that starts in kindergarten all the way up through 12th grade to teach all the good habits that people need to have.
Yeah. Well, I think it's good you're talking about it again, because what I found is once people get money, then to your point, they're like, oh, well, that's not important for us to talk about anymore because it seems gauche. And so then, but then how are you supposed to get it if all the people who have it will never tell you the real path to it?
Correct.
And so I think it's actually pretty liberating now that some people on the internet are saying, hey, okay, this is what it took. This is what it looks like if you have this much. It's hard to even conceptualize some of it. And so I think it's good.
Yeah, no, I think teaching how to make money and capitalism, I believe there's a view of, if you're in the TikTok world, right, there is a view that socialism is much better than capitalism. And we don't teach why capitalism is good, and it's a force of good, right? And it can be very productive. It can be bad, but you can also teach kids this is how it can be additive to society. And that's not out there, and I believe it should be for sure.
What do you think are some of the ways you can teach kids, or how do you teach kids about money or to get money?
we want to teach kids how to earn money, right? How to save money, how to spend money effectively, how to invest, and how to donate, right? And it's all of those things. And for kids, right, it needs to be real money. It's why kids often got allowances and things like this, which is you're having to teach them how to be responsible about it. That yes, you have to earn this. And when it's your money, you're going to spend it differently than if it's not your money, right? And you are going to learn how to invest. So like in our middle school, for when they earn money, they can run and, basically Robin Hood for kids, right? They can invest. And, there's just so many great lessons. One of the things we allow the kids to do after they've earned it, they can invest in anything they want. And some seventh graders YOLO that money on some crazy thing and lose it all, right? And their parents are like, wait, what's going on? Why'd you let them lose it? And the answer is the best time to have that happen to you is when you're in seventh grade, not when you're 27, right? Or if you're going to have debt and a credit card, right? The time to learn it, we let the kids borrow, around it, and then they have to pay it back with interest. And our kids know what 25% credit card debt is, when they're in fifth grade, because they're having to earn back, whatever they borrowed to buy. And so all these life skills that you want to teach are totally teachable and actually need to be taught. Right? If you ask most parents, you're like, what are the life skills I really want my kid to know? Financial literacy, entrepreneurship, right? They want that as a course. And in standard school, historically, you haven't been able to. Sort of in our new model, you can absolutely spend plenty of time teaching kids these skills.
That's so smart. Yeah, I mean, we always say the best business school is being in business.
Yeah.
Like I find business school to be kind of a funny misnomer. Yeah. I think it's maybe okay for the network, but actually I think a better network would probably be building things with other builders?
100. I couldn't agree more.
What do you think? Should people go to MBAs?
No. That's an easy one for me. Is no. It is a great 2-year period to build up a set of great relationships. But no, there's nothing on the business knowledge that you're going to come out of there that is a fraction of what you would get from building your own thing for that 2 years. Like just not even close.
And putting the $100K on the line for a startup instead of just getting debt that you can't ever escape.
Correct.
For business school.
No, it's just, and back to the skills. These skills are all of how to start a business. You have to do it. So in our high school, we have a set of students who want to create a new curriculum for next year. And the curriculum they want to start is how to make $1 million in high school. Right. And they want to program, because all our afternoons they get to work on their passion project for 4 years. They're like, we can totally teach kids, right, how to be able to, what are the skills to build a business starting in high school, right? And that is really effective. And it's not going to be a traditional MBA curriculum.
Now, people have said lots of things about Alpha School and, hey, billionaires are teaching our kids. And how can we do this with AI? And it's completely free form. And oh my God, you give them debit cards. But then if you pause for a second and you think about what school is like for us, at least I'll say for me, really hard wooden chairs with tiny little desks that you have to sit in for 8 hours a day, where you have to ask to use bodily functions and be taught from somebody that's never actually done the thing that they're teaching you about. It's wild. And so, if we were taught, you go to school, you get good grades, you go to college, you get a good job, then you make money, and that's how you get rich and happy. What do you think the real process is?
Well, I think the way to think about it, or the way we think about it is, if you focus on K through 12, it's been 100 years. We educate everybody on the planet the same way, right? It's put them in a classroom 6 hours a day, teacher in front of the classroom. And that was actually 100 years ago the best way to educate the population, right? And it is the most equal thing on earth. You can be in the poorest school district in any country in the world. There's a teacher in front of a classroom. The building's not very nice. Or you can go to a really expensive private school and there's a teacher in front of the classroom in a nice building. But it's the same mechanism. And, sort of where Alpha came from was, if you stepped back and said, okay, AI is coming, the world's going to be different in 10 years. And you have a kindergartner and you're like, am I preparing them, for a dozen years from now, right? What would that be? And you rethought this from the ground up. How would it be different? And so that's what we did, is we just sat there. And the first thing, back to the experience, the first thing that we said was, if you're going to send kids in this for a decade plus, they must love school, right? That is just a design goal, right? I'm a product guy, right? And so I just look at this as a product manager, where I'm like, how would you design a product? And so the first thing you'd say is they should love school. And we literally measure it we ask kids every 8 weeks, do you love school?
We have like an NPS score.
Absolutely. 90+%, 96% in the last one said they love school. We actually had to ask a new question because it got so high, it was sort of useless to ask that, is we say, do you love school more than vacation? Right? And 40 to 60% of our kids each 8 weeks, depends on the workshops and whether they're really cool or what their vacation choice is. But we we want to strive to build an environment that if we're going to send your kid there for a decade plus, like they should love it more than vacation. Right? My highlight, I've been principal for 3 years, was a few months ago in the spring, 2/3 of the high school students sent me a note and said, can we keep the school open this summer? We don't want summer break.
What?
Right? And I did not like school. And what I went through was not that. I got in trouble for skipping school all the time in high school.
Yeah, you dropped out of Stanford
and
too.
I dropped out of college for the same reason. And, but that is crazy. But that is what our design goal should be, right? If you're going to rebuild school and your kids, right, it should be that. And
but don't people even push back on you on that? Like, I know my parents were like, you're not supposed to like it. You're supposed to go. You're supposed to listen. It teaches you discipline. So do you get pushback? Like, should we actually love school?
So I didn't start Alpha. It started a decade ago plus, and Brian and Mackenzie started it. And there's a long story on getting my own kids in it. But when I sat down with Brian, when my kids went in a decade ago, I said, what are the things I don't know as a parent that I'm wrong about, about education? And he's like, the first thing is kids must love school. And I was like, it's spinach.
Yeah.
It's spinach. And he's like, you are so wrong, Joe. And you will figure that out. And I can now tell you, now that I'm principal, if you want to build a great school, they do have to love it. And if you ask back to learning grit and hard work, one of the life skills we learn is grit and hard work, right? And our kids, all our 8th graders 3 weeks ago finished a Tough Mudder, right?
Wow.
And crossed the finish line at the same time. It was a teamwork grit combo life skill workshop, right? And so kids will do hard things, right? But you want to do it in a framework where they love it.
Yeah. And hard doesn't always mean monotonous either.
No, those are two totally different things. They're exactly the opposite. If you want a kid to love school, it can't be monotonous. It is literally the opposite. And so that design goal of, you have to learn, you have to build a school that kids love. Mm-hmm. That is what unlocks kids' potential, right? Is they're doing it because they love it. The kids don't come in the summer because they're working on some monotonous. It's that they believe they're changing the world, right? The reason that team who's working on it is they're working on a project where they're building an app, and their goal is to teach 100 million teens the key to their happiness is contributing to their community, right? And they're building that app, and they're like, we are going to change the world with this app. It's going to be the greatest. They have all these influencers who are helping them.
Mine was like, get an A- and no more, because what would be the point of that?
Right. And so this whole point, right, of exactly, I was the same way of, what's the minimum academics I could do to still get through the system?
Yeah.
This is, you want to engage kids on their passion, right? Starting in middle school, we start passion projects.
Well, let's back up though, because I think people could listen to that and they might think, well, that sounds really nice. And they won't know your background and that you're incredibly data driven and the success that you guys have had. So like, it's not just you're like, that sounds good. I'm Joe. I'm a touchy-feely hippie guy. That's not you. You're the opposite of that.
Sure.
In fact, like many times I think people had said, or you had said, I would be the last person to be building this kind of company. So like, what does the data say? You have a particular way we're going to talk about on this podcast that you all believe if we educate kids like this, they will be more successful, and thus we will have all these beneficial repercussions. But your success has been pretty wild. So tell us like why we should listen to you on this.
First of all, we use on the academic side, there's multiple parts, but one element is, are they actually learning academics in our schools?
Yep.
And we are the best performing academic school in the country. On every single class we have is top 1%. And so in every grade, every subject. No school can say that. And here's why though. Here's what you should actually do if you're a parent. We have known for 40 years that kids could learn 2, 5, 10 times faster. There's a whole field called learning science that has been studied for decades. Papers came out when I was in high school, right, about how we could radically transform education and allow kids to learn 10 times faster. But they all started with this will not work with the standard teacher in front of a classroom model. And so there was no way to solve it, right? Because economically, you couldn't give everybody an individualized tutor. You couldn't go master. You couldn't implement some of these learning science concepts. And, one of the things that has changed, right? And our second, when we talk about if we're going to redo education for the next decade, our second principle is kids need to learn 10 times faster, right? We need to allow them to learn 10 times faster, because sitting in class for 6 hours a day in homework is not going to prepare them for the world that's coming. And so that was part of why I got involved 3 years ago, was I had to go build a learning engine that teaches kids 10 times faster. And, all these learning science papers, every parent can go read them and understand it's possible. We took AI, Gen AI, combined with learning science to build this engine. So if you come to our schools, you sit down at this learning science-based AI tutor that's not like ChatGPT. It's different, that you'll have to experience it to understand it, but it's going to teach the kids 10 times faster. So in 2 hours a day, they sit down for 2 hours, they learn more than twice as much as if they sat in class. And so they're learning so fast, it doesn't matter where they come in. They can come in, top 25%, bottom 25%. They are going to get to top 1%. The longer they're in the system, right? Because they just keep learning twice as fast as anybody else, and doing it in only 2 hours a day. On the academic side, kids can crush it. Like, if I could wave a magic wand to fix things, if parents could understand a couple things. One, your kid should love school. You can't say you should have a crappy 12 years. No employer would say, come work for me.
And hate it.
And it's going to suck for 12 years. Like, when we talk about love of school, it's just so obvious in every other part of our life. We would be like, that's ridiculous. And yet, what employer, it's going to be terrible. But that same parent who's running a company with, thousands of employees, when they look at kids, they're like, yeah, you should a decade. It's terrible. You should hate it, right? It's good for you. And that's why all these kids are unhappy, right? And that's why they're not engaged. And that's why middle school and all these mental health issues. It's because we've designed a system that bores the crap out of them. We hope they hate it. And then we're like, let's put stress on them. And you do all that stuff, and you're like, God, that doesn't work out that well, right? I mean, it really is insane, like the system that we've designed. And so going back, you're like, yes, you should love it. So parents need to understand that. That's critical. And who, at the end of the day, wants to look at their kid and be like, I want you to hate this. The second is, though, you can crush your academics in 2 hours a day. That's it. That's all you need. So all of us who went through, because all we know, 6 hours a day at homework, you want to do better, you have to, all this crazy amount of time, that's not required. 2 hours a day, you'll crush it.
And how many students have you taken through this? So over the last 3 years, you have a lot of data to back this idea.
No, so we publish our data, so you can go to the website and it'll download, right? We are huge believers in standardized testing. And lots of parents don't like standardized testing. Yep. When they come to alpha, they actually love it because they don't believe me that the kids are learning in 2 hours. And so all these parents who are like, no, I don't like standardized testing. I'm like, great, just trust me. Don't worry, they're learning. They're like, no, okay, wait. And then until they get the standardized test back that shows their kids crushing it, they are very skeptical.
Yeah, I saw a tweet from you on it. And the tweet was, 3 girls in my alpha high group were described by their parents as not math science girls. This happened to me too. They've been focused on other pursuits, launching a Broadway musical, competing for Miss Teen USA, building millions of TikTok followers, and became nationally recognized as a teen dating expert. But their math SAT scores, 790, 790, 790, which is wild.
People read that and say that's crazy. In our school, that's normal, which is, there's a meme in the world, and in our middle school, a lot of girls come in and they're like, I'm not math science. It's a TikTok meme out there. And so they all say it. And one of the exercises we make them do is we're like, oh, really? Well, go find the learning science paper that's been written, because there's 10,000 of them written, that shows that middle school girls can't learn math science, right? And there's obviously none. They all can. And so that's where you get into the motivational part. Mm-hmm. A lot of what you're trying to do with kids, right, when you're raising them, is what are the limits they have in their head, right? What do they think they can't do? And how do I break through those, right? And that is the part, because that is what our guides do, right? We have guides and coaches whose entire job is to sit there and say, instill a growth mindset. Kids, you can do anything. And how do I motivate you to put in the effort to show yourself to do it? Right? And so if you want the most controversial thing we do about paying kids and all these kind of things, so we will take any middle schooler, girls or boys, and we will pay them $1,000 if they get to top 1%. Because lots of kids come in and say, I'm not top 1%, right? I can't do that. Only GT kids can do that. Everybody else, I couldn't be a 790 SAT. And we're like, well, $1,000. And we show them, because of how these AI tutor works, it's not about IQ, it's literally about effort.
Wow.
And we show them if with this tutor put in the right way in the system, they all can do it. And it literally will calculate for them. It's this many hours of time for you to get to top 1%. And they're just like, okay, well, that's many hours. Okay, I'm willing to put in the work. And then when they hit 1%, it changes how they see themselves. Right? A lot of what you're trying to do when you're breaking through these blocks is they're like, I'm this kind of person. I'm not a math science girl. And you're like, no, that's just not a true statement. And then when they get top 1% in science, they're like, oh, I guess I am. And then once kids, you have to pay the $1,000 once to sort of get the breakthrough. But once they hit it, none of those girls needed any incentive to stay. That's actually not true. There's one of them needed some more incentive to get 790. And we'll talk about that. But they didn't need any incentive to get to 790, right? Because they saw themselves as, oh, I am a top 1% math science girl now, even though I'm still trying out for Miss Teen USA and all of those. The Broadway musical is another one, because we can talk about that. Another controversial part is, for her, she is trying to first all teen produced Broadway musical, right? She sourced all the singers off TikTok, right? They had 1 million streams like the first weekend. She needed to go to New York to meet a producer, right? I think she's run 3 or 4 shows off Broadway already, but she needed to get to that producer meeting. And I was like, well, and she wasn't at 790 math. And I was like, you can totally do it. And there was an incentive, and it would pay for her to fly up to New York to meet the producer. And she's like, okay, I'll go do that work, right? And then fly up and get it done. And so we will, back to earning. You're like, maybe you didn't want to do it and it was a little extra work to get to that 790, but you earned money that then you could spend on your passion project, right? That you could do. And when parents hear that story, okay, do you want to have a framework, right, to earn and save and spend? If your kid's earning money on some of the academics, that's breaking through some of, their inherent limitations, and it's being spent on learning how to invest or investing in their business or passion project they're doing. Generally, parents are like, okay, that's really a great idea. Like, I heard the headline of Alpha and I was like, this is stupid and I don't like it. And then sort of when they dive down, they're like, okay, wow, that's great. I wish my kid would go through that.
Yeah, well, I think the headline's actually pretty fantastic. It's like, where students learn 2x in 2 hours, test in the 99th percentile, and then give students the rest of their childhood back. That is good. You got that's a good marketing slogan. And the best part is always when your slogans are true.
Buying a business or launching your own venture can feel impossible if you're stuck figuring out the website, logo, email, marketing all at once. But here's the good news. GoDaddy Aero is here to help. So just a few prompts, it builds a professional website, a logo, an email, even social content, all tailored to your business. It's like having a whole launch team in your laptop. Instead of months of grinding, you can go from idea to launch-ready business in minutes. No more waiting, no more guessing, just a real online presence that you can grow with day one. Suddenly, the thing that was just a tiny idea in a notebook is online, polished, and ready to scale. So if you're ready to take your idea to life, head to GoDaddy.com/Codie Sanchez and try GoDaddy Aero today.
What about for the rest of us? So people who are listening who don't have kids, who would have loved to go through this, but maybe feel like they've hit their levels. They can't get further. This sounds great for these malleable brains, but for them, it's not possible. Are they just out of luck? Can you learn how to change your brain and become a top 1%er past high school?
Yes, you can. It's not the market we're focused on, but all these learning science concepts, there are some elements at age, but fundamentally, you can apply them for your entire life. And, K through 12 and take higher ed. If you take higher ed and down, the education market is a global $7 trillion market. And so we're focused on the K through 12 for now. But there's a huge opportunity in education to take all these same concepts for adults. right?
What's the TAM of the larger side?
I mean, near infinite in this
Yeah.
world. Here's the issue you have just right? When you look at the world today, right? AI is going to change everything. There's going to be massive reskilling that needs to occur, right? And we're focused on, okay, how do we prepare the world for from kindergarten up, right? And then, but there's a whole nother set of, okay, all these jobs are going to be obsoleted, right? And how are we going to retrain all those adults? And I believe that's a huge market and that somebody needs to go in there. And I believe entrepreneurs need to go in. We can't just count on the old educational system that we all been doing for 100 years. We need new entrepreneurs to go in and take these concepts and say, how are we going to reskill all the people who need it?
You're on obviously the very cutting edge of AI, and you have been forever. From, I don't know if you would have called, some of what you were doing back at Trilogy and ESW. Did you call it? Did you say you were AI focused?
Well, it technically was AI. So my AI world was in high school. I wrote a paper on AI, and one of the segments back then, this is in the 80s. This is in the 80s. So this would have been like 1985. Was neural nets was a new area, and I was like, they're decades away.
Yeah.
Back then, what AI was like expert systems and ontologies. And so I went to Stanford, and I was literally in class with Professor Feigenbaum, who's the father of expert systems, which was AI. Now, the problem was AI was in its downturn phase. It had boomed sort of early 80s. There was a bunch of failed AI companies, so you could never call it AI. So when we started our company, when I dropped out of Stanford and started the company, we didn't call it AI at all because of the negative connotations, but it was the first AI product to sell $1 billion. And so that was sort of our claim to fame in the 90s of what built Trilogy, the software company, was AI. We just didn't call it that because we didn't want the connotations.
That's fascinating. And now obviously the company's huge and you've bought all these companies and, you're sort of a behemoth in tech. But God, I was reading some old stories on you, and I'm sure sometimes it's even hard to reimagine, but I loved this one line about how by the fall of 1991, you guys are at this point, I think still in your garage, sort of a 5 guys, no money, and you'd been 3 months away from product for 2 years. And, you did the thing of working 20-hour days and sleeping under your desks. But the part that's interesting is how people were talking about how your former classmates, they were going to work for Steve Jobs and Bill Gates, and how some of the other friends of yours began kind of telling you, what the hell are you doing? What are you doing? You're a smart guy. You dropped out of Stanford. You're going to build this thing. You've been 3 months away for 2 years. This is going to fail. Stop being even maybe what your dad said to you when you graduated Stanford. Was that Gregory was your dad?
It was my dad when I dropped out. I didn't graduate, so yes.
Yeah. And did he call you a moron for dropping out of Stanford?
It was a big title in the magazine, Forbes, I think. The title was "You're a moron" because that was his quote.
Does that still feel weird, or does it not register for you anymore?
Well, no, but back to that is I believe, and we were talking about the MBAs before. Here's my difference of an MBA and an entrepreneur, right? Entrepreneurs believe they're going to change the world no matter what everybody else thinks, right? That they just sit there. And I remember back to one of the, we were building this engine, this, configuration engine, and we're in it, and we were just we're totally going to do it. And of course we know how to do it, and we'll get there. It just needs some more time every 3 months, right? We kept doing that. And I remember the parent of one of the founders, right, of the co-founders, is just and he had dropped out. And so the parents mad at me because the kid's dropping out and doing this futile task. And it was all dumb and stupid. And my dad's calling me a moron, all those kind of things. And I was like, no, you don't understand. Bell Labs had 100 PhDs working on this and they failed, right? I mean, isn't that awesome? And to me, I was like, because we're going to solve it. And nobody else has been able to figure this out.
This is not awesome.
And literally, they're like, that literally is an example that convinces me you're never going to succeed, right? And it's that blind belief that you are right? And that is what entrepreneurs do. Back to the MBA, I used to give talks at Harvard Business School and stuff back in the 90s. And I would just sit there and say, here's your problem as an MBA. You're going to look at the spreadsheet and you're going to say that cell doesn't work. So the spreadsheet doesn't foot, right? It doesn't work. So I'm not going to do this idea, right? Because you're just looking at it and analyzing it. I'm like, an entrepreneur looks at that cell and says, I will change that cell. I will make that work, right? And that's sort of the difference between the two. If you're going to be a builder and an entrepreneur, you're going to go change reality. Like when we started back, 3 years ago when I became principal, I'm like, I have to build an engine that teaches kids 10 times faster, right? And I'm like, no, we got the learning science, this Gen AI, it's totally going to be doable, right? And yes, you can do that. But if you analyzed it, it wasn't obvious. I think today people still don't really believe it. But that is what you do. You go out there and you say, I'm going to go build a school that people love, that, all those crazy things that you read about, entrepreneurs go make that a reality. And that's what's awesome. And I believe just, are they made or formed? We believe in our high school that you can teach kids this skill. And if they're following their passion, they all have ideas where they think they can, put a dent in the universe. And we just need to help them do that and give them the skills to do that.
Why do you think your brain worked that way? Why was your neural network wired to the fact that you looked at something almost impossible and thought, yeah, we're going to do that?
I think humans naturally are like that. And I believe the standard school system sort of beats that out of them. If you talk, so starting in middle school, a lot of people come into our schools, right? We had a few hundred people join. We have schools now all over the country, and they joined, in the last 10 weeks ago when school started, and they come into middle school and they're consumers, what we call consumers, right? They scroll TikTok, they play Fortnite all day, right? They've been caught in that dopamine, evil screen time hook. And we run everybody through an exercise where we say, what are your values, right? Go do a values exercise. Do a Japanese ikigai, if you know what those are.
Sure.
What do you love? What are you good at? What does the world need, right? What do you get paid for? And do a vision board, if you think as a way to think about it. These kids' vision board is not, I want to scroll TikTok all day or be a consumer. Mm-hmm. They want to go change the world. They believe they can, right? They want to. They just don't have the skills. And then after they create all this vision board of who they want to be, it's always awesome. Kids want to be awesome. They want to do great things. And then we make them do a 168-hour project where they track every hour of the week. Mm. And you are what you do. And that's when they have this realization, this middle school girl comes up and she's like, I guess I'm going to be the world's best TikTok scroller. Right. But the disappointment in her voice when she was like, I just did my vision board of who I want to be. And I realize, right, I've been caught in this consumer mindset and I'm trapped. And that is what our job in middle and high school is, to teach kids the skills to go be a builder, to go be a creator, because they all want to do that. It's not that this generation, right, it's like, oh, there's no ambition. They don't want to. They want to. Our school system just doesn't give them the skills to make that transition.
So have you found that you can take your brain back from being hijacked by this attention economy we're in?
100%. So another example, this was probably a month ago, where a student came up to me where this was one of somebody who worked super hard. This is the other part about hard work. 10 weeks, he came up to me, he's like, 10 weeks ago, if you had said, sign a contract, I'll pay you $100 an hour for the rest of your life, and you will just play video games. That's it until you die. He's like, I would have sold my soul and signed that contract. Right? That was it. He was caught and he was sort of happy. It's like literally he was signing up to live in the Matrix. Right? And he was totally willing to do it. And he's like, today, and he was presenting to the other high school kids at Alpha. And he's like, today, I don't even have time to play video games. Right? Because he is building, right? And so you absolutely, all these kids, but what they need to work on, if you put them in school for 6 hours a day in homework, you've made an environment where they're like, okay, my escape is to scroll TikTok and play video games because I'm not building, I'm not engaged, I'm not doing hard things. Like the third thing that I need parents to really believe, that a lot of parents don't believe, you got to love school, right? You got to learn, crush academics in 2 hours a day. The third is the key to your child's happiness is high standards. And high standards are when they engage, they want to engage in hard things. They want to go build an app that's 100 million kids are going to use. That's going to, right? They want to go build that. And that's hard. And they know it's hard, right? But they will, right? And that's why they'll come in and put the effort in, right? If you think about athletics, I don't know if you have an athletic background, but athletics, the athletic ethos in America, we actually believe all these things. We just don't believe when you apply to academics, we think it the opposite. So Westlake, right? Parents in Austin are like, I want my kid on the Westlake football team because they're going to be state champions. It's going to be the hardest thing my son ever does, right? They're going to work. They do go in the summer for practice, right? They're in the weight room at night, right? They are doing the hardest thing they've ever done to be on the Westlake football team, right? But they'll remember it the rest of their life. But if you said that same thing, right, and said that's academics, right, or what the school day should be like, they're like, no, definitely not. I'm not going to have my kid do that. It's only in after-school athletics where we believe that.
It's so good. I mean, I hope you guys expand past even high schoolers at some point. Or to your point that somebody listening right now hears this, and somebody who has built billion-dollar businesses is getting so fired up about changing people's mentality in education. And what I'll say is, like, it's the same thing I see with a lot of employees in our companies. There's actually some sort of disease or virus where we want to get by. We kind of want to get by. We do have the vision board maybe of a really cool life, but this idea of hard things as the key to loving life is something that we subscribe to. Here, our first line at Contrarian Thinking's Creed is those who say it's impossible should get out of the way of those of us who are doing it. And so we believe that deeply, but people don't last here very long if they don't believe that. And I kind of proactively will say to the team, if you ever say we can't do that, or that's not my job, you're fired. And you're welcome too, because hopefully it snaps you out of it and you go somewhere else. Do you find this brought, not even in the kids, but in the talent, in the guides that you're hiring, in the employees in your companies? Am I jaded in that I'm saying there does appear to be, there's these two worlds. One world where there's builders in Austin, like our mutual friend Brendan and, Dino, who I think you know from Saronic too, and they're just animals. And there's this one, and then there's this other side where there's so many people that I just want to shake them and be like, you have so much potential. What the fuck's going on? You're in your own way.
That world I completely agree with, and we believe every kid, right, can be a creator. The issue is they haven't found what their passion is. So when they come here and they're not engaged, it's because this isn't the hook, right? We talk about every kid has a passion for learning. It's just not always academics. So back to my story of my dad, I was a shirker in school. I was the slacker who I wasn't trying to do impossible things, right? I'm the one who was disengaged all the way through school, right? And then I drop out. My dad's like, you're a moron. But then there's a follow-on to that, which is 18 months later, he sits down with me and he's like, I'm so glad you dropped out, right? I'm so glad you dropped out because we'd been working 100-hour weeks, living under the desk, right? And he's like, you have found what you love. And he's like, before this, I was worried that you were a lazy little shit, right? And a parent's terrified of having that, right? And that's in school, that's what I was, right? But then once I found what I wanted, right? And you just take off. And we look at every student that we have. That's our job, is to find what is it that lights them up, right? And that's what school, why you have to say kids must love school more than vacation, because you found it. Anything else, it's a parent pushing their values on the kid, not what the kid wants to do. And so instead, you're like, oh, you want to build video games? We're going to let you build video games. You want to write sports? So we are starting, right, a sports academy where if you love sports, right, you get to start sports in the afternoon, right? And you still have to do the rigor of the academics in the morning in the 2 hours, right? But those kids are going to be the best academic performing athletes in this country. But they're also going to engage in be a D1 bound middle schooler or a D1 aspirational middle schooler. And it's always tying things in to what the kids' passions are that unlock it. Like one of our life skills that we teach in the afternoon, teamwork and leadership, entrepreneurship and financial literacy, socialization and relationship building, storytelling, public speaking, and grit and hard work, right? Those are the things when we say, in the AI world, those are the life skills that kids really need. And so take public speaking. Okay, you go to a 10-year-old and you're like, public speaking. They're going to be like, okay, right? They're not going to engage. And you're like, what's wrong with you? Why don't you? It's such a valuable life skill. Oh my God, look what you can do. And the parents are lecturing and it's terrible. You say, wait, post-game press conference, right? You want to be able to go crush your post-game press conference. So at our sports academy, literally, we don't call it public speaking. We actually teach them how to do a post-game press conference. And they're like, and they become really good, right? They become great public speakers on that, right? Because that is their hook that engages them. If you talk about, oh, you have to learn all this math and financial literacy, like roll your eyes. You're like, we're negotiating your Nike contract, right? And all of a sudden, all the skills they need to learn, right? Let's take on the entrepreneurship side, gross margin, okay? What could be more boring to a fifth grader? Our fifth graders launch a food truck, right? And this was a day, this was last year. I go up to them and I'm like, why did you pick breakfast food, as your product for your food truck? And they're like, have you seen the gross margins on breakfast food? And I was just like, okay, this is so awesome, right? And they couldn't have been more excited about the business.
Nothing hotter than gross margins.
Right? And they are just sitting there and they are loving it and they're talking about it and they're thrilled and they're having to learn teamwork.
How old is this kid?
So these are fifth and sixth graders. So 2 years ago.
You're like 15? No,
12,
you're like 12.
Yeah, you're like 11, 12
I don't
years
have
old.
kids. Does it
No,
show?
sorry. No, yeah. So you're, excuse me. So yes, here's 11-year-olds who are out there and back to teamwork, right? And so they would go to like car dealerships and set up the food truck, right? It's all breakfast food. They'd make $1,000, but they were dealing with real world business things where one of the kids, the kid who's on the grill doesn't show up. And they're like, oh my gosh, how are we going to be able to do this? And all these kind of things. So all these kind of things you can do in the afternoon where you ignite kids' passion, right? That's the key. And I believe as we look, these skills that we talk about where you do the values chart in your 168 hours, kids will use that for the rest of their life. Those are the life skills because they will somewhere in their career. Me, 3 years ago, right? I'm like, oh, I guess I'm doing a big pivot from software to education. I'm going to go be a principal. Right? And how do I go get the skills and engage in it and all those? And so I think the skills we're teaching today are what adults will need going forward for sure.
Yeah, because it seems like you need both, or you can use either as a lever. And maybe explain it to me differently. But yes, kids need to love school, or they need to or you need to love what you're doing. But isn't it also that like you need to learn to love the game, or like you find what you love inside of it? Because it also seems like you have like, pure, whatever you call that, intrinsic love for X activity. And then you have like extrinsic love for an incentive such as dollars or outcome or reputation or whatever. And so do you need to play both of those?
So absolutely, which is you like what you're good at.
Yeah.
And so one of the things, like why people in athletics, why they hold kids back is they're going to be a little bigger, right? And then they're going to be better. And then because they're better, they like it because they're getting accolades and then they get more playtime and you get that positive
just
cycle
like
loop.
Pavlov's dog.
Yeah, and you just start getting into it and people want to do things they're great at.
Yeah.
In middle school, these girls would have said, no, I'm never going to do that. But now they're like, yeah, I can totally do that. And they want to stay because we showed them they can be good at it, right? People don't want to do things they're bad at. So if you're bad at something, right, it's how do you bootstrap them to get better? Right. And that's why the old academic system doesn't work is once you get behind or you are labeled bad, right? If you're a C student in third grade, there's like a 90% chance you'll be a C student for the rest of your life, right? And that's not, there's no inherent brain chemistry around that. That's just a systems issue, right? The way we design school. But we can take those same C students and make them top 1% and show them, no, you could actually be really good at this. And we think that's true for all the life skills as well. Right. Well, the Tough Mudder one. There were there's some new, 3 of these middle school girls, right? So they're, 12-year-olds. And, I asked them, they were new to the school and it was the week before the end of the session. And I was like, hey, break's coming up. Are you really excited? And they're like, no. And inside, because they didn't want to go on break. And I was like, inside I was happy, right? I did cheer because they wanted to keep going to school and not go on break. And I said, well, if you could wave a magic wand and fix anything about the school, what would you do? They're like, we wouldn't have to run the adult course for the Tough Mudder, right? They're like, that's so hard, right? But their guide who's motivating and showing them they can do it, I was like, go talk to some of the high schoolers who did it, right? And all the high schoolers have a picture of all their whole team, right? Their whole classmate, they're all covered in mud, right? And they're all,
I've done it. It's
camaraderie.
miserable.
Right. But they're all there as a team and it's a team picture and they all still have it on their wall, right? Because they did something they didn't think they could do, right? And that kind of thing. You have to bootstrap these kids. That's what school is, right? You're bootstrapping them to show them they can be capable here. And so a lot of these things, and when you talk about getting people into the right roles and what they should do, it is this Japanese ikigai of you're trying to figure out what are you good at and what do you love. And sometimes you're like, I really love this, but I'm not good at it. And on some things, you can bootstrap them into it, right? Like, okay, let's get you good enough so you can do it. And then once you hit that, right, then all of a sudden you're like, oh, I'm capable.
So does intelligence have a big predictor on success?
This is a good question. So in K through 12 today, the best students, there's actually it's all coded on two things, IQ and Big Five conscientiousness. School today in a time-based system with a teacher in front of a classroom, you basically need to be high IQ and a conscient grinder, right? You have to be a natural grinder. And our view is I have to get this out to 1 billion kids, right? So I can't have those two limitations. So on the product side, we're like, how do we break those two things? So back to learning science, a mastery-based, individualized, personalized lesson plan solves the IQ issue to an extent, which is we can't make everybody, I'm going to do quantum computing and figure it out. But for sure, in K through 8, the K through 8 curriculum, if you take 95% of America, they could all be top 1%. That there's just nothing intellectually challenging enough, if done with a mastery-based education, with an individualized tutor, that they couldn't get to top 1%, right? I'm never going to be a nuclear physicist at Stanford, right? I don't have that IQ, right? So there are some upper bounds where it really matters, but for fundamentally of just teaching our kids, that's not true. But in a time-based educational system, it is. Because, when you're in 6th grade and there's a hole where you miss some knowledge, you basically need more IQ to bridge the gaps. But if you have an individualized tutor, it's going to go fill those gaps for you. The second on Big Five conscientiousness, if you're a natural grinder, you're all set, right? We use our motivation model to compensate, which is how do I motivate this kid to grind, right? And get through it and do the hard work. And so and motivation's lots of different things.
Is there a formula for motivation?
So we spend, when we look at educating a kid, there's 2 parts to educating a kid. The first is, and 90% of it is having a motivated student. And so our schools are designed, 90% of my design work and our emphasis is on motivating. 10%, which is the second thing you need, is you need to put them in lessons of the correct difficulty, right? Which AI tutors do great. Right? They'll figure out what you know and don't know and say, look, I know your age grade is 6th grade, but you need 4th grade math. And I'm just going to give you 4th grade math, fill it up. But now I have to get you to want to do the 4th grade math. 90% that's motivation. So the number one motivator, like we have a huge motivation framework on our schools. The number one motivator and the name of our product is time back. Give kids their time back. There is nothing more than money, more than anything. Time back is the biggest motivator. And and so that's why we're 2 hours. If you want 6 hours a day in homework, right? If you take the Westlake honors track, right? You can't pay those kids enough to be happy. But if you go to those same kids like in our high school and say, it's 2 hours a day. If you want like 1550 plus on the SAT, it's 3 hours in high school. But that's it. And then you get all your afternoons for 4 years to work on your passion project. That motivates students, right? Mm-hmm. If you go to our sports academy and you're like, okay, I'm going to give you the whole afternoon, right, to play basketball, but you have to engage in the app for 2 hours. The kids are like, that's a fair trade. And just as a product manager, the story, my first week as principal, McKinsey and Brian had started it. They're like, okay, we'll let you be principal, but you got to live up to the commitments. They have to love school. And so I go to the 5th graders my first week and I'm like, you guys love school? And they're like, no. They're brand new. They're like, no. I'm like, okay, what would make you love school? They're like, less school. And I'm like, how much less? They're like, none. And I'm like, okay, that seems a little light, and we literally negotiated it, right? I was like, so 2 hours a day. Would you engage in these apps? If I gave you an app for 2 hours a day, if then 4 hours a day was awesome, fun stuff you loved. And they're like, okay, that seems fair. Right, that's a fair trade. And so that's literally how we got
that was
the
like
2
your
hours.
First user
No, people
group.
were like, how do we get 2 hours? And they want some sophisticated analysis. I was like, okay, we got 2 hours and these kids say it's okay. Then I went to my learning science team and I said, can we, fill their brain with all the awesome knowledge they need in 2 hours? And they're like, absolutely, we totally can do it. And so that was sort of the beginning of it and that's why it was codenamed Time Back, but we actually made it the real name is give kids their time back. Then once you give kids their time back, there's tons of other motivations, right? So our teachers, right, we call them guides and coaches, they don't teach 7th grade science because the AI tutor does that better, right? So instead, they are hired for motivational and emotional support. And their job is to say, how do I motivate this kid to greatness? How do I get him to do hard things, right? And what are the things? And sometimes, in kindergarten, it's like, here's a sticker. Right? And the kid's like, oh my God, it's a sticker, right? Couldn't be happier, right? 8th grader's a little harder. Stickers don't work as well, right? But you're like, oh, the time on your passion project, right? Oh, you want to do a Broadway music. Wait, you want to write a book. Oh, wait, you want to go become an equestrian, right? And we'll let you out in the afternoon off time to go do that, right? Whatever the motivation is that will get them. You have a whole range, everything from time, there is money, financials and incentive, privileges, right? So like mobile squad. Yeah. And the Broadway privileges is also just freedoms in the school, right? If you crush all your academics and hit some goals, you get mobile squad, at the end of the session, and mobile squad gets to go on some trip somewhere, right? Or you get the privilege of learning in a beanbag, right? Like the younger kids where you're like, okay, you know how to learn on your own. You become a self-driven learner. You don't require a teacher or an adult to, babysit you. You learn on your own. You have the freedom. Like our middle schoolers get to go to the 2nd floor where there's, less restriction and less rules, and they can sit in a beanbag and sit on their computer and learn or do whatever. So there's all these different things around motivation that allows kids to learn. Off-campus lunch, right? Younger kids, the number one motivator to the younger kids is lunch with their guide, right? They love their guides, right? How we measure our guides and teachers at the younger, like a kindergarten, you're like, do you love your guide? As you get older, the question we ask kids is, every adult had 1 or 2 teachers who transformed their lives. Is your guide that for you?
Whoa.
Right? And that is the standard. And that's what our guides do, is their job is to say, right, I'm going to help you achieve your goals, right? Your dreams. That's what I do all day, because I don't have to sit in front of the class lecturing or grade quizzes or whatever. I get to connect with the kids, right? And people talk about, okay, this is like AI is going to change the role and teachers are going to change in our world, right? But teachers did not become teachers to grade 7th grade science quizzes. They became teachers to transform kids' lives. And in our world, and why everybody wants to be an alpha guide, we had 80,000 people apply for our jobs. They want to be an alpha guide because they get to spend their entire day connecting with kids and helping them transform their lives into who they want to be.
You seem to have pretty high EQ. Would your wife disagree?
Yeah, my kids would too. Both my daughters. I have 2 daughters. And they both
well, I
would be.
found in tech, it's not always a huge correlation between the two. Yeah. But now are you the same person you were when you were building Trilogy and these other companies now?
No, if 90s Joe, right?
Yeah.
And versus Family Man Joe, right, is totally different, right? And I could not be the principal if I did not spend 20 years raising my daughters and being a family man, getting married.
What were you like back then?
Then I was absolutely your consummate 90s tech bro guy. And
what does that mean? You were just intense and focused?
Intense and focused, and relationship and the EQ part, like a 0. What are you talking about? Just if it was a pure mathematical equation, well, obviously, logically, this is the answer, do this, right? And it was very much there. And this concept that relationship building, right, and building out your network, right, is so valuable, right? I mean, right, socialization, relationship building is one of our key life skills we teach the kids. I had 0 of that. Right, back in the 90s. And I'm like, why would you do that? I'm just going to build a better product or whatever. And the human component was, so far down on the list.
Yeah.
And versus today where, right, when we think of the skills we need to equip our kids for the future, those are the skills that matter. Right.
A guy who's built multi-billion-dollar software companies, who was really happy doing this. I'm a little bit happier doing this too. I need to get over it. I'm working on it. But now you think that relationship building and human connection is more important?
I'll give you an example. and it's my own daughter as an example. My oldest daughter is an introvert like me, naturally introvert, and great student. So she got 1,600 SAT. She's a math, English double major at Stanford, right? So,
Slacker.
and she's one of these, I love, she was the opposite of me on this. She loved academics for academic sake. You know, in high school, she like read calculus books for fun. You know, when she got to Stanford, she's like, wow, these STEM boys can't write. So she created a writing program called equation-based writing. Because in freshman English, you have to grade. She's like, God, these are so bad. Let me help them out. So she's like, loves academics. But in high school, her guide, I was like, look, what really matters for her is relationship building. Because she'll naturally just spend all her day doing academics. But in our school, we're like, the afternoons have to be about life skills development. So she started her own Substack, right? And writing online because she loved to write. But to promote it, right? She's like, okay, I have to go on Twitter and like build an audience.
Place is dark.
And
Careful.
I mean, her guide would sit there, and it took her guide 6 months of motivating her and convincing her and working her through till she'd send her first DM. Right. And she finally sent a DM to Sahil Bloom, right?
I'm buddies with him.
Right. And Sahil was like, had written something that she's like, oh, this is so applicable to high school kids, and literally wrote the article. Right.
Wait, what's your daughter's name? Or do you not say that publicly?
On Substack, she's Austin Scholar.
I think I have engaged with her on Twitter or met her.
You may have. She has now 20,000.
Put it together.
So she has 20,000 moms basically who listen to her about what it's like to have no teachers for 10 years and go to Stanford. And what is her thing is university needs to change too. So she, her and the alpha kids. Does she not
get invited back to Stanford then?
No,
Do you both not? Or is Stanford open to it?
She's thriving at Stanford. But what's interesting is a school, schools are bundles of things, of which academics is only a piece, right? And
True.
And so she hates her 100 series lecture classes. She's like, okay, my math class is a complete waste of time because the apps I use, right, are way better. I learn way faster. She's like, but everything else at Stanford, her dorm mates, her classmates, right? She's in a sorority, right? Her after school activities, the environment of Stanford, she's thriving, even though she's like, okay, this math class for an hour is a total waste of time. And everybody knows that, right? Back to these same things. Harvard has published an article that says AI tutors are better than Harvard teachers, right? So it's not like we don't know this. It's just, how are we going to change as this goes forward? But back to the relationship building, and all of that, this key life skill she needed, she didn't need more academics. She didn't need physics 2 AP, in high school. She needed to spend her time supported by this guide, right? Because one of the other things you get into adolescence, you don't have kids yet, is they stop listening to their parents, right? In middle and high school, right? It is. Their job is to, right, get accepted by society. So they start caring about their peers more than their parents, right? Which is always a transition for a parent to realize that, right? And so like when she was applying, it was Chloe she trusted, right? Who was her guide, who is like, Chloe, when she said, look, relationship building is important, it's like, okay. But it was really hard for her. And she needed that coaching, right? And support. It's high standards, but high support. It's not just drop them in the deep end. It's coach her through it. And then eventually she got it. And now she has this great network, right? But and so those kind of skills, if you have a relationship person, you're also, to the arts theater girls, right? You're like, okay, guys, you're going to do math. Right? You are going to do math. We're going to show you have all these skills. And if you're the academic, we're going to teach you relationship building or entrepreneurship or whatever else over there. If you are the EQ girl already, right? We have girls who have millions of TikTok followers. And we're like, yeah, you're going to get 790 math, right? One of our kids is about to do something that in science that like nobody in American history and science has ever done this in high school, right? And if you had asked as a middle schooler, would they do it? The answer was no.
When you look at education today and where we're at, like, do you think we can actually re-educate the entire, let's even just say the U.S. using the technology we have?
100%.
How long will it take?
Well, this is why I want to communicate. My goal in this is we need entrepreneurs and builders to come in. If we keep on the status quo, not going to happen, right? It's a 100-year-old system. It's not changing.
And what happens if we don't change?
It's really bad.
Like paint a picture. As somebody who deeply understands AI and education.
Well, the skills you're going to need, like back to just if we graduate if we spend 10 years and educate kids the way we've been educating for 100 years, those kids are going to go into an AI world and have no skills that matter, right? And people are going to say, why, I just wasted their whole childhood, right? And I made it miserable and they hate it, these things. And they don't have the skills that need, right? Like when we look at the world, right? If you're an Uber driver in Austin, right? Robotaxis, right? Waymos, all this stuff. That's not a good place to be as an adult. There's massive transition on the adult, and entrepreneurs need to go fix that. But I'm focused on the K through 12, which is there is no better time to be a 5-year-old because AI gives kids superpowers, right? If you look at, they can learn 10 times faster in the mornings, right? Not give them ChatGPT. That's really bad. They'll all use a cheat, right? Chatbots are cheat bots if you're a parent. If you're wondering if your kid's using chat on academics, 90% of the time they're cheating. But in the afternoons when they're doing life skills workshops and launching a food truck, right? 11-year-olds don't know how to launch a food truck, and there's not a teacher who can teach them, but AI is going to help them figure out how to do it. High schoolers can't launch Broadway musicals, right? Except AI gives these kids superpowers, and we need to show them, right? It unlocks their potential. Right. And they love it and it's exciting and right. We can totally transform all that. And so that if you're a parent, you're just like, this could be the best 12 years of your kid's life. Right. And we need to go change it. And now to change it though, we need way more entrepreneurs than just me.
Because it can't be cheap too. Like going to Alpha School, what does it cost?
Yeah. So Alpha School is expensive. So our tuition's $40,000 to $75,000. And so back to design goal though, when I designed it, I was like, pretend price is no object. What can you do? Now, we are building a whole nother set of schools, right, at half the price, at $20,000. We spend in America $20,000 a kid to educate them. So that's sort of my price target. We're launching, right, and we've launched 10 of them so far. We hope to open hundreds next year of these Texas sports academies. They're $15,000 tuition. Middle school, right, they're micro schools. They're 25 kids. Middle school D1 bound athletes. Think 25 really good basketball players, right, in middle school who do academics in the morning, basketball in the afternoon. And so think of hundreds of these schools around Texas. At $15,000, which the voucher program just was announced, which is like $12,000. So parent pay will be like $300, $400 a month, right? So dramatically more accessible than Alpha. And so we're building a whole set of schools like this. I need lots of entrepreneurs to go build this, right? We need a school for gifted and talented kids, right? Those kind of things, sports, arts, theater, music.
Because if you don't, you could have a world in which you basically have massive discrepancy. Those who are taught at Alpha School use AI, are unlocked, and everybody else.
Correct. Oh, you absolutely. Like I have my job on this whole thing is, Alpha is the first product we're building. It is the high-end one. Just branding wise, you have to own the high end in education, right? You can't, you want to start at the high end. You want to be the Ivy League, right?
Yeah, you don't want to be the discount degree.
Correct. Parents don't know about education, so brand really matters. Mm-hmm. They trust brand. Yeah. And so you have to go establish the brand, which we've done, right? We're the most talked about school in the world by 10x, right? And so that's what Alpha's doing, but now we're bringing it down. And so we're building the software platform where it will be available. And, to solve the US, I have to get to 20,000. But to get to 1 billion kids, I got to get it down to 1,000, right? I have to get it down to where, in 5 years, everybody on the planet, billion kids have to be able to access a tablet that's less than $1,000 that will teach them everything they need to know in 2 hours, right? And so that's what our design goal is getting it down so that everybody can have it. Because we have to, because in this world of AI, we have to prepare the kids differently than we have the last 100 years.
Does that daunt you? Or are you like, we're going to do that?
Oh, we're totally going to do it. The learning science, it's a lot of work, obviously, right? There's a ton of work, back to the Billionaire side. Like I put in $1 billion to kickstart this.
Just to Alpha. Right?
Yeah. Well, the software platform and stuff. So we're doing in the Sports Academy. So I'm funding a set of different things. But to change education, so education's a $7 trillion market. Like $1 billion's a drop in the bucket, right? Texas alone spends $100 billion a year on education, right? So societies and parents spend a lot of money on education. Like if you do surveys of parents, they will spend up to 10% of their income on educating their kid. So it is actually a really good market. Societies generally spend 5% of GNP. So it is this great market. It's just we've always had the same system for 100 years. And now what's different is, okay, can we go get entrepreneurs and builders to come in and build these awesome products, right? That will transform what the 12 years is like.
We, it's interesting you say that because we have an education business. It's called Contrarian Thinking, and we teach people two things. One, we teach them how to buy businesses. Like normal, my theory was, I was in private equity, I did acquisitions, and I thought, this is not that different. Like what the PE guys do at the highest level, leveraged buyouts, is not that different materially from what you do with an SBA loan or with seller financing of a very small business. You've bought a shit ton of businesses. And so it's not easy. It's actually hard and awful and really difficult in many ways, but it's not rocket science. It's actually not that complex. It's like, simple but not easy. And so we created an education company where we are attempting to teach. We've taught about 10,000 people how to do it. And if the average, the average American doesn't even own a business. And so it's really hard to get good data on how many people will ever acquire a business. But we think it's like less than 0.01%. Like most people will never acquire a business. It's very weird. So if we're able to take, right now we're about 37% of our people who come through our program acquire a business. And it's really important. You don't just acquire any business because there's a lot of risk. But what's fascinating to me is when we started teaching people how to do this, the immediate response from many people, and it seems to be like a pervasive, I can't really figure out why, is like, one, if you could do it, why wouldn't you just buy all the businesses yourself, Cody? Why would you teach other people to do it? Two, education is somehow seen as, and there's a lot of bad actors, so maybe why, but it's seen as like lowbrow, scammy, couldn't work, not good, taking advantage of people. And then it's also seen as like maybe not sophisticated. Like, if you were really going to build something real, you would build Trilogy. You wouldn't build an educational based system.
If you can't do,
right.
teach.
Like, why is that? It's so pervasive.
Correct.
And
why? So that is, so if we want to get controversial, so I believe part of my role is to bring capitalism to education. And it is seen that capitalism is evil. For-profit and capitalism are evil in education, just straight out. No, that nonprofit is the only way to do it. And fundamentally, I believe that's part of the problem, which is nonprofit. I gave a talk at Masters of Scale, which is, how to scale big ideas.
Yeah.
And education doesn't scale and the reason is nonprofit means non-scalable. Like if I have a set of donations, right, and I build the world's best product, the better the product, the faster my money goes away. And now I'm done, right? There's plenty of charter schools who have 3,000 person wait lists. And I go ask the head of the school, I'm like, well, why don't you open another campus? And they're like, I'm waiting on a $40 million donation. Versus I had 1,000 people at an info session in New York City who are going to pay tuition to this for-profit. I will have no problem raising capital to open a new building because of its for-profit. Capitalism scales, right? This $1 billion that I threw in, that's not enough to fix education. We have to show what's going on, right? We have to show there's great businesses here. And so, but there's a view, appropriately so, there were bad actors and lots of for-profit scams. We just need to go get the good entrepreneurs who can use capitalism for good, right? Like one of the things we do is it's why we publicize all our academic results. That we are like, guys, don't trust us. You shouldn't trust us. Look at our results, right? And but unlocking human capital.
Well, that's what, and the results mean SAT scores, right?
In this case, academics or the life skills. It's the 3 commitments. Parents are like, oh my God, my kid really does love school, right? And they're like, you actually as a parent, when it happens, you're like, okay, this is great. Then the second part is, okay, they're crushing their academics. And then that third, life skills, when they're launching the food truck, you're like, okay, this is actually what my kid needs to do. Or they're building relationships or whatever that life skill. No, they watch the Tough Mudder. They're like, okay, this was better than my school. So they look at that product. You just need a product focus. And like for yours, here's how I would design the product, right? In a for-profit world. So we have a set of high schoolers who are like, okay, we're going to build a program to be a millionaire in high school. How do you make $1 million in high school? Right? And so they're talking about pricing. Mm-hmm. And so one of their proposals is we're going to charge $150,000 a year tuition, money back guarantee if you don't make $1 million. So it'll take $600,000 of tuition over 4 years. But if you make $1 million, it pays for it. Right? And it's a money back guarantee. So if they don't deliver, back to your point of your scammy, you're like, it's free for the person, right? And it's that kind of product design that no nonprofit would do that. But a entrepreneur who's saying, oh, wow, that's the kind of thing that we should go build, where you have this closed loop where you're unlocking their potential. And then people are willing to pay that. People would make that trade. They're like, wow, if you teach me how to make $1 million, right, while I'm in high school, and it's going to be fun, I'm going to love it, it's going to be all these great things. And we have to make sure of how we're teaching them. We're not teaching them how to do it scam. Yeah. One of our final character, right? Character, community, classmates, and culture, right? That's one of the huge elements of school. And at the end of the day, character is the one parents really care about. Are you teaching these kids to be good kids? People. We can teach kids to build ethically awesome businesses, right? They're building apps. They could build crappy apps. They're building an app to teach 100 million kids to contribute to their community, right? So we can teach all these great values to kids as part of school. That's one of the jobs. And we can teach them ethical business at the same time.
Okay, last question. What about for people who are really scared to have AI teach their kid?
Yeah, that's a great question. You should be terrified. So today, your kid, 20% of kids, right? I think Brendan uses this stat that they calculated. 20% of your kid's life is influenced by AI. They are being brainwashed by TikTok today, right? This is that, or Fortnite, whatever is out there. It is, and it's getting worse. And what you put into kids' heads really matters. And so one of the things is you have to figure out who are the trusted people putting it in. It's why I say chatbots are cheat bots, and they're terrible. Like, if we could ban like those chatbots being in school, that would be great. And so part of what our job, back to branding and stuff, you have to build a trusted relationship with parents that what you're putting into the kid's head is good. Right? Now, what I can do with AI, right, is actually build one where the parents can validate and trust it, right? So we know what it is, right? But if you have it just, Wild West freeform and you're not doing it, like, what is your kid doing online, right? That is something, it can be very bad, and people should be worried. AI could be good or bad, right? And we need to have a huge effort to make sure that we use it for good. Wow. We have a project where we are building the TikTok that is engaging as TikTok, but it's going to put all the cool stuff into your kid's head, not the bad TikTok stuff.
We need it. Although, people talk pretty badly about TikTok these days, and I'm a big Elon fan, but I have found that like TikTok algorithm is actually pretty easy to change and manipulate. And so, on my TikTok, there's a few things I like. I like those. I get rid of the others. I don't really see any nonsense. I don't see brain rot. I don't see any of that. I do think these days on X, it's harder. There's so much negativity. And I think it might be more sophisticated. But, I think optimists, they sound too Pollyanna, but they make all the money, and pessimists sound smart and then make nothing.
Yeah. Well, and to this online, we believe teaching kids healthy online habits matter. Yeah. And how you're talking about, you're curating a TikTok feed that's healthy for you, right? You can also curate a bad one.
Yeah.
And if you don't teach kids how to do it right, they'll end up with a bad one.
Yeah.
And I actually believe, because we have kids on X doing the same thing, you can curate a great feed on X.
Yeah, I'm working on
domain expertise and all, heavily using mute words and all that stuff, where, your block list and mute word list has to be really long. Twitter has a lot of experts, where if you want to learn about learning science, if you want to learn about learning science, you can build a filtered list on X where you can become an expert in how to learn 10 times faster.
Yeah.
So it's all these things. They can be good or bad, right? And you have to figure out how to actively curate your presence. And also, back to tracking, having kids track where they spend their week, this 168 hours, helps them, right? I don't just want to be a consumer. I want to become a creator. And that's what, as parents, we should all care about.
Is there some resource you love or something that you have from Alpha, an article you've written that we can mention and say, if you want that, click here, and then we can drive people direct to you?
My daughter will love me if I do this. Austin Scholar. She's got, 200, she writes every week. She's got 200, articles out. It literally is from, 10 years of not having, a teacher in this new world, what it's like to go to college in it. and it's academics plus, the social emotional learning
I
side.
love it. We'll link
that would be, we'll put that in.
Also,
That's the
you're a
single
good
best
dad.
source. That's the single best source.
That's a good dad right there.
So,
a
thank
proud
you.
dad. Joe, this is so cool to hear about. You have my brain spinning about ideas here. And I just want to thank you for building something that is not, one of my CEOs used to say to me back in the day when I first started getting online, he said, you know what, here we get rich quietly. And it was, and I get that because it was his thing he had built. He had built this incredible business that he had every right to do it. But I thought, I don't know. I don't think it's a zero-sum game. And so I started getting on the internet for that reason. And I think people like you sharing this and creating an area for education is like the only way we fix so much of what I see on the internet every day.
I couldn't agree more. And if I can convince some of your listeners, right, some of your audience to come over to education, there is nothing. So back to my whole career, I obviously had a good career pre being a principal. The last 3 years have been the best years of my life. And I'm going to do this 20 years. I am more excited about the next 20 than my last 20. And I need to go get other builders and entrepreneurs to come over here and see how awesome it is, right? And so if you're like that, send me an email, DM me, and let's get you building to solve education. Because at the end of the day, there is nothing more important for a society than how it raises its young. That is the single societal issue that really matters. And so come work on that.
Thanks, Joe.
Thank you very much.
Your brain is creating your reality, but your brain is not trustworthy. And so for me, the rule is don't trust your brain.
How much of the things that we are told about food and medicine are a lie or wrong?
Most of it. I'm going to punch through all the noise, but then we're going to put all the science into me. It's kind of insane as an intelligent species that we would willingly do things that would shorten our life or cause death.
He has this wild lab that's like in his house. And so you'll see on the interwebs that I played around with it, there's one that you sit on and it's it tightens your pelvic floor and your rectum.
Oh
and so
my God.
You sit on this stool.
Brian Johnson is just not the same as everyone else. He was severely depressed when he founded, scaled, and then eventually sold a company where he pocketed about $300 million. He created a helmet that tracks his brain waves and actually how old his brain is. And that isn't even actually the craziest part about this guy. He created an entire anti-aging protocol that runs his life according to the algorithms that he and his doctors have determined. He actually doesn't care about how anyone now or at all sees him. He actually only cares about the future. And in fact, he shares just about all of this on the internet, even how he's thinking about sex and all the things that he is going to measure from them. But every time he shares something about his sexual routine or how he injected Botox into his penis, somebody responds with something like this. Yeah, but have you had sex lately? So I first got connected with him when I said, well, first they'll laugh, then they call you crazy, and then they ask you how you did it. And we started DMing back and forth. And what Brian said to me resounded, that discipline is freedom and freedom is superior to enslavement by pleasure. That actually is the happiest that he's ever been. So after all of his commercial success, he actually started another company, which was a $100 million fund to invest in things to progress the ability for humans to never die, or as he says, don't die. And then founded Kernel, this helmet that he has here that allows him to measure his brain waves and how old it is. What's fascinating is his routine that he talks about. 11 pills every day, wearing a baseball cap that shoots red light into his scalp, collecting his own stool samples and monitoring nighttime erections. He even gets his family involved, with his son at one point transferring his blood into his father to see if he could live longer, and doing the same thing to his dad and actually lowering his dad's biological age. But I'm not sure any of that is actually the most interesting part about Brian. The most interesting part about Brian is why he's doing all of this and what you and I can learn from it. And so if you right now are thinking about, how do I change my life? It's not the tactics that you're going to get here. It is the mental frameworks that will allow you to do whatever tactics you want to change your life. This is Brian Johnson, the man who thinks that you do not actually have to die.
Bring the band in. Let's go.
Do you have a personal grandest ambition that is the most important to you? And is it living forever, or is it more than that?
I guess I like mapping history and looking at a different era on how they mapped out ambition. And then if you take 2024 and you pose the question, what is the most ambitious undertaking that our species could undertake, what would it be?
And do you think the answer is to live forever, at least in this moment, or to live longer?
That's the 0th step. Is don't die is the most played game by every human, by every living being on every animal, every plant, every human. It's don't die every second of every day, and so it's played more than capitalism. It's played more than religion. It is the most played game. And then above don't die, then we choose whether we want to make money or be adherents to religions or whether we want to do our various things. But it's all premised on don't die.
Do you think that you're attracted to it because it is the most played game, which means that you have the most competition, which means it might be the hardest game?
No, I think it's interesting because my education is primarily from biographies. And I like reading throughout history and looking at a person in their time and place, and they identified something impossibly hard to do. And then they're able to see the thing and then do it. And at the time, people thought they were crazy or that they were unintelligible to that time and place. But then their thing became inevitable and normalized, and we just forget that it was ever crazy in the first place. And so if you take that notion and you apply it right now, then if you say, what is the most ambitious, craziest thing we can imagine as a species? And one is don't die, but two is how big is consciousness? We know what it feels like to learn and to crawl and walk and run and to fall in love and to have heartbreak. And we have these certain things we know. But just like if you pose this question a few hundred years ago, how big is reality? You would have gotten an answer that would have dramatically underestimated the size of the microscopic world, the size of the universe. We're living in the fraction of what real reality exists. And so I wonder if the same question could be applied to our consciousness. How big is our conscious capabilities? Are we living in a fraction of its ability? And as we start applying tools of artificial intelligence and biological engineering and add new chemical interactions, could we be on the verge of this opening up a frontier of experience we can't imagine?
Do you think that a lot of people don't ponder questions like this because they never achieved post-economic success? And so the fact that you sold the company for $800 million, achieved what most people, that would be the most interesting thing about them, would be that. And I think a lot of people think, when I hit X, I will be Y, which is happy, fulfilled, whatever. And so you hit that and then went on to this next thing. Do you think you would still be asking these questions if you hadn't been post-economic or really rich, in other words?
Yeah, I mean, it's the game I've wanted to play since I was 21. So I made the goal. When I was 21, I told everyone I was going to do something that would change the course of humanity. I mean, I'm 21, I'm naive. Like, what do I know? And that's ridiculous to say as a 21-year-old. Like, how's that even? But that's just what I cared about. And it's what I wanted to do. And I didn't know what to do. So I said, I'm going to make money first. And then with money, go out and try to figure out what to do. So it's been something I've been working on explicitly for 25 years.
I have this other mentor that I've had for a few years now, Bill Perkins, Die with Zero.
Yeah.
And it's so interesting because I think one of the most impactful things you can do as a young person is get around people who make your brain sort of expand to a point of discomfort. My thinking is so much smaller than yours. And for most people, they're barely getting by. Yeah. When somebody tells them that they could even achieve a millionaire status, or they could be free, or they could have a six-pack, that almost seems like too far. Mm-hmm. Was there some moment where your brain flipped like that you remember?
It was when I was living in Ecuador in extreme poverty. Came back to the US and reality had just changed for me.
And why?
After being among them, nothing mattered to me except the contribution I could make to the species. I didn't care about making money for money's sake. I didn't have aspirations of buying a big home or an expensive car. I just wanted to improve people's lives. It was just this burning desire. It lit and it's never gone out. It's just gotten stronger. And it honestly feels like it drives me. Like even when I don't, it's still there and it pushes me past my own comfort. It's an undescribable relationship of like what is happening inside of me and then how does that manifest with what I'm actually doing?
So if you were going to try to replicate that experience for somebody else and to make them think bigger than they could even imagine and maybe get on a health journey similar to yours, are there words of wisdom that you would give somebody to try to kickstart an Ecuador in their mind?
Yeah. I do this with my 18-year-old, my son. To his credit, he is attentive, he's curious, and he's willing to listen. And he's trying to figure out what game does he play in life. Because he's wise in that he's listened that you're born into games in society. Like you're born as an American, you're born into capitalism, you're born into like all these norms. And then we learn them and they become invisible. So we don't realize we're actually in games we didn't choose to play. We're just playing it. And then we try to become number one if you're competitive in one of those different tracks. And so what I've tried to suggest to him is don't assume that any game being played in society is your game. Extract yourself, evaluate them for what they are. I guess I would summarize that and say, don't try to be number one, try to be zero. And number one is like you're going for rank. In a given game, you're trying to beat other players. A zero is, this is like a different concept, zero is principle thinking. You're trying to come up with a new idea, a new game to play. And so I guess the advice would be try not to feel overpowered by societal expectations of what they want you to play.
So in frame, if you were in front of somebody, you know, who was unhappy in some way, shape, or form in their life, or maybe even happy but really striving, how do you break the frame? Do you go, do they first have to sit and even go, okay, well, here's one game I'm playing, which is I'm in finance. Why are you in finance? Here's one game I'm playing. I'm dating somebody. Do you want to be dating somebody? What does dating mean? Like, how do you put that into practice?
Okay, so let's start with the most basic thing. We all have thoughts. I learned this when I was depressed, that I would have thoughts that would say, Brian, life is not worth living, and you might want to kill yourself. In fact, you really do want to kill yourself. In fact, that's the only thing that gives you pleasure is the ideation of killing yourself. So in that moment, when I learned that I am not my thoughts, that my brain was generating these observations and suggestions and even statements, that I could observe them and say, thank you, brain, for making that observation. I know that you're not me, so I'm not going to act on that, or am I going to acknowledge that as truth? And so you are not your thoughts. And so in any situation, because your brain is creating your reality, and if you just accept them when they land, then you're going to play the game your brain tells you, but your brain is not trustworthy. Absolutely not trustworthy. And so I know with my thoughts, in any given situation, I will disregard the first 5 or 6 thoughts I have on anything, because I know my brain's like just trying to situate itself. And even then, it's going to have critical errors of biases and all kinds of assumptions. And so that's the very first game. And so because if you're walking into dating or career selection or something, if you can't catch the first layer, which is your mind is creating this false reality for you, then you'll be stuck downstream from that.
What about the hippy dippies in Austin where I'm located who say, but just listen to your gut. Your first reaction is right.
Yeah.
How do you push back on that, or do you?
It's a bit of a too simplistic of a rule to universalize. That is not to say that intuitions are not valuable. Like your body's legit doing computation, doing pattern matching. And you're probably able to generate wisdom that your conscious mind can't. And so it's not that it's not good, it's just that it's a data point among a larger set of data points. And some people I think will encourage that go with your first decision and then don't look back. Others will say, be more mindful. It's probably individual, but there's not a clean answer because people are trying to simplify the complexity of life. And they're trying to say, like, here's a rule. And so for me, the rule is don't trust your brain. And then, of course, if someone says, okay, how do I not trust my brain? That just made things worse for me. Like, now it's really problematic. But it invites you to start a new game. So, for example, if you learn that we each have 188 proven cognitive biases. They're shortcuts our mind makes to try to make sense of a really messy reality. And so your brain is always making these shortcuts to help you make sense. But then the trade-off is like it may not be as accurate. So like confirmation bias. If I'm trying to find something what I really believe about a new concept, I'm going to find information. If it confirms what I want to believe, yep, I accept it. And if I find information that challenges my belief systems, I'm going to reject it. And so just being aware of that. And to me, that's been the single most valuable practice I've ever maintained, is knowing that I cannot trust my own mind. Because once you start from there, then you can't trust others. You can't trust institutions. So who can you trust? And that then that starts the game of like how to build the life you want to build, because otherwise you're going to probably be disappointed in the process of trusting other forms of authority.
It's so good. You know, I think what's interesting is you're obviously very smart. You sold a company for hundreds of millions of dollars. You've had a lot of traditional success as we would define it in today's day and age. And what else I think is interesting is usually when that happens, people then have a lot of opinions and maybe they go out in the world and they try to assert those opinions on others. But you've actually done something very different. You've said, I am going to turn myself into a singular action of my opinions at this current stage. I'm not going to try to assert it on others. I'm going to assert it on myself with like second or third order effects on that are only really applicable to you. And one, I think that's really rare. You have questioned pretty much all medical institutions, maybe even food institutions across the US. And so I was curious, since you are a living embodiment of, you know, watch what I do, not what I say, how much of the things that we are told about food and medicine are a lie or wrong?
Most of it.
Really?
Yeah, most of it. Yeah.
Why do you think that is?
Everyone's trying their best to figure it out. I don't think it's because of malice. I don't think it's because pharma is some kind of evil, group trying to take over the world. They're doing their thing, and everyone is. Doctors are, institutions are. So I don't assign any malice. People legit are trying to figure out the right move. And so that's what I was trying to solve is there's so much confusion around health and wellness. And I wanted to say, I'm going to punch through all the noise. We're going to look at every single scientific study ever published on anti-aging and lifespan. We're going to rank them according to the power laws. And then we're going to put all the science into me, one person, and we're going to measure me as the most measured person in the world. And then we're going to see what we get, like what happens. And then I'll make the whole thing for free for everyone.
Explain what a power law is.
It's where you get 80% of the benefit for 20% of the effort. If I want to be in good health, let's just say I'm not trying to solve an urgent problem, I just want to be in good health, then the list of things you could do are hundreds. Currently, culturally, it's interesting to like cold plunge or sauna or like celery juice or like take your thing. There's hundreds of things that you could do. And we try to say, we're not going to follow fads. We're going to follow scientific evidence. How do you punch through all the noise and say, tell me exactly what to do according to the very best science? I'll do that. And so we don't want to mess around with things that aren't effective. We don't want to do something because it's culturally cool. We want to actually increase lifespan. So we tried to really use science and measurement. We tried to basically make the best health protocol in human history and then make the whole thing available for free for everybody.
What do you think in the next 10 years, to simplify again, we will look back on that we do today and think, oh my God, that's the tobacco of today?
Yeah.
Is there one thing? Are there three? What are they?
Our entire reality. So this is my prediction so just for context setting, let's imagine we travel back in time to 1870 and we can whisper something in their ears. So we say, psst, there are these new ideas about these microscopic objects that cause infection and potentially death. They're called germs. Your eyes can't see them, but they actually exist, and you can do things to stop them, like wash your hands and have other kind of hygienic practices. Now, if you're in the 1870s, you're going to say, that's stupid and that's nuts. If you're open-minded, you may say, okay, tell me more. Now, it turned out germs are real. They actually do cause infection, and there's hygiene practices that help you increase your ability to survive infections. And so if we pull the thought experiment forward and we say, let's say the 25th century can whisper into our ears, what do they say to us?
What do you think they say?
I think they say, you're in the eve before the creation of superintelligence. And the intelligence you're creating is growing at a speed faster than you can comprehend. That renders your ability to predict the future to zero. You cannot see. You're up against a wall of fog. Now, this has been the first time that we have ever had this experience because Homo sapiens have always said, I can look at the past and see how things have been. Yes, there may be discovery like germs or like penicillin or the computer or the internet that may surprise your inability to predict, but generally speaking, the future is somewhat predictable because things change rather slowly and like to some degree of predictability. That's no longer the case. We can make guesses on what we think the true characteristics of intelligence may be, but really we don't know. And so for the first time in the history of Homo sapiens, we are challenged in saying anything about the future, including what we want, what we like, what we dislike, what we prefer, what our ideals are, what our morals are, what our ethics are. We are no longer going to be the authority. Now, people are going to like fall on multiple sides of the spectrum. People say, we are going to tame AI, we're going to control AI, we're going to build the world we want. I can't imagine a situation where we humans are still the architects of intelligence in some duration of time.
Now, before you were able to have ideas this big that have repercussions for generations, you talked about it there for a minute, but you have been public about being extremely depressed, suicidal, and at your lowest, and building a huge company despite all of that. What changed specifically that you think could be replicable for other people?
Yeah.
Besides the zeroth principle thinking.
It was so easy in retrospect. 10 years, I tried everything to fix my depression. Like you name it, I tried it.
For 10 years?
For 10 years. Wow. And then I did two things that fixed it. I left my church and I got a divorce. And those two changes just made it evaporate. So it was environmental and it was contextual.
So if you were to give advice to, let's say, your kids or the next person, before almost any of the blueprint, is it get your power of place and community right and your person or partner right? Yeah. Like, do you think those are even more fundamental than the health aspects?
Yeah, or I'd say if I could speak to myself, I would say, and I was trying to help myself problem solve, I would say, what do you feel paralyzed by? And once you identify that, then what is the strength you feel that this thing has upon you? Like in that moment, leaving my church, my religion, like my existential existence felt unimaginable. And leaving my marriage with my 3 kids, I was like an all-in dad. I worked really hard. And so my identity was so built up into that. So those things felt impossibly hard to break. And so how trapped do you feel and how impossibly hard do they feel to break? And if you can identify those two things, you probably can put your finger on the thing that's, potentially responsible. Now, not always. This is for my case, but that definitely was what kickstarted this next phase of my life. And so others are just genuinely in a really bad spot. And for them, I would say, try your very best to get your basics right. Like go to sleep on time, like make sleep your number one life priority, do well on your diet and exercise, and just try to get the basics in place as your number one life priority. Probably has the most powerful starting point change.
Quick little side note here. Those two things hit home like a gut punch. I was married before, got divorced, and my religion used to be finance at a company with a bunch of people who had ethics and morals that weren't aligned with me anymore, but I couldn't figure out why. I used to think that you just felt sick all the time after you ate and that it was normal to not sleep very much, and that in fact, you could be in a relationship and fight all the time and have issues with alcohol. And then I quickly realized when I got divorced and I got out of that company that that's not normal, or it doesn't need to be your normal. And so despite us going into a bunch of tactics and specifics on how to do this from a health perspective, what resonated with me is, what if the most important thing we do is just who we choose to partner with for life and what we choose to pursue? Whether that pursuit is religion, or that pursuit is our company, or that pursuit is a set of values. If we can get the values and the who right, maybe all the rest can fall into place. Yeah, when I was talking to my husband about interviewing you, he likes to talk back about when I was in finance, and he was like, you looked really different. I had sort of more bags under my eyes. I was taking red eyes nonstop. I really wasn't sleeping very much. I didn't at all value the idea of sleep. And I really didn't eat very thoughtfully. I drank way more than I should have. And so he always likes to remind me that, he's made me younger, which makes me giggle. I think you're right. You had a quote the other day in a newspaper about sleep that I thought was interesting, and about its correlation to sort of death as opposed to progress. I think a lot of entrepreneurs think, I'll sleep when I'm dead. You only need 4 hours. Let me take a stimulus. Get up at 5 a.m. What is your thought on that culture?
Yeah, it's martyrdom culture. And this is, if you want to try to reach sobriety of thought, anyone in life, like you and I right now, could both say 1,000 things about right now. We could talk about the politics. We could talk about world affairs. We could talk about business. Like we could make so many observations about this time and place, the dramas that are happening in the world. So that's a valuable thing to offer insight as it relates to here and now. The other way to think about reality is to say, what does the 25th century observe? And that has this really nice effect of washing away all the noise of this moment. Just like we think of the 15th century, we think 10 things happened during that entire century. Like 99% of what happened is washed away. Like we don't care. We want to know about the big advances that push things forward. And so when you take a question like, what is current culture around sleep and, hustle culture and things like that, you can try to approach the topic by in the bubble of this moment. But if you seek clarity of thought in the 25th century, and that's when I come back to the 25th century is going to say, you're about to give birth to superintelligence. None of your silly games matter anymore. You need to re-architect society around this new philosophical structure of don't die. The only objective is that intelligence continues to thrive in this part of the galaxy, but your games of martyrdom are basically a death cult, and you normalize to it and you can't see it.
You've talked about a lot of different ways to decrease your blood pressure to a level of an 18-year-old. So if I kind of zoom out and look overall at people like my father and most people who are struggling with blood pressure, this is very tactical, but what would you say to them? Is the answer just go and get pharmaceutical drugs?
You can use drugs, yes. You can also significantly improve that through diet, sleep, exercise. And usually when these kinds of questions come up, it comes back to the basics. You can do more esoteric, expensive therapies, but the headline with Blueprint is that it's $2 million a year. It's not. It's like $1,500 a month, which includes your groceries. It's just expensive for me because we measure. It's that quantification which is so expensive, and the research. Yeah. But the actual doing it is very low cost. And so, diet, sleep, exercise, what people already know, it's not sexy and it's very hard to do. That's why I think most people just don't do it.
Yeah, and it's hard for companies to make money off of it, which means that the incentive and structure to sell you on it is also not there in the same way there is quicker fixes.
That's right. Yeah. Who's making money when you sleep well?
Yeah, exactly. Not very many people.
Actually, like your employer does. They just don't acknowledge it.
That's true. Yeah, it's much easier to acknowledge the person that stays longer. I'm guilty of this as well, as opposed to what is the actual output level. Yeah. But that's really comes from a society not measuring.
That's right.
And so, why do we like work hustle culture? Because it's very hard as a leader of a company to measure every single employee with a KPI to their ROI to the company. Yeah. It's actually hard. In the same way that why does Blueprint cost $2 million for you? Because you're actually measuring and categorizing everything so that you can verify $1,500 a month is reasonable for somebody else. Right. That would be a better headline that the New York Times would never write about you.
Exactly. Yeah, for sure. Look back through history. How many times do we look back and do we say, oh, that culture was so on point? Almost never. We look back and we say, they're idiots, or how do they not see this, or how primitive, or we make these really harsh judgments as if we are enlightened creatures and they were these primitive animals. But we're just as silly. We're just blind to it. And so you fast forward a little bit in time, the future is going to see us as silly. And if you can take that humble acknowledgement that that highly unlikely that we've reached the apex of intelligence. And it's most likely that everything we do is just absolutely erroneous in so many ways.
Yeah, you had a tweet that fucked with my mind, candidly, a little bit, which was about money. And it was frugality, saving, investing, planning, discipline, admirable money management. Why is it done? Wealth is immortal. Possibilities of our longevity are shifting. Maybe our thinking will shift too, which made me start realizing, why do we value money? Because we think it lasts beyond us. But we do not believe inherently that health lasts beyond us. Ipso facto, we put less value on it. I don't know why, but that really opened up something for me. What else would you say on that?
Yeah, we are a species that craves immortality. We do. We crave it through our children, through money, through legacy. We crave it through accomplishments. And I'm suggesting that true immortality, or don't die, may be the replacement for all these other games we've been playing. That there's a new reality in front of us.
Yeah, you don't have to leave your name, Rockefeller, on the building of a college campus if you can, in fact, continue forward. You do that because you don't want to be, we all want our life to have meant something, because I do think in a lot of ways, Hobbes is right, like nasty, brutish, and short.
Exactly right.
And so if that is what we believe to be true, then why wouldn't we spend time trying to make it all make sense?
Exactly. And this is why these ideas are so provocative and why they generate so much hate, is that people have these knee-jerk reactions and they're defending all their life choices. Because to realize that you've been playing a game your entire life that is about to change and you may start from zero just like everyone else is a hurtful thought. And so instead of confronting it and being open-minded to it, you want to just bury it, like we do with all these things that are uncomfortable. And that's why I think that people can't even, the rage I get directed at me is unhinged. And I don't think people even realize why they're so mad. But it's not about me. It's about their situation, their life decisions. And this is not blaming them. This is just like being human's hard, and confronting new ideas is hard. And I'm trying to point out what I think is going to be obvious in the future when they look at this moment.
Yeah, I want to close out with one last question here, which was, you tweeted about certain acts that we take now today you think of as committing violence against ourselves, which I think is really powerful, because when you assign words like that, then actions can change. What do you mean by committing violence against yourself that's different than how most people might? Except for the people these days who say words are violence, in which case none of this is relevant.
Yeah, it was a thought experiment I did, that a century from now, what would they say that society had done to change reality? And so we as a species have been moving towards increasingly less violence across everything. And I was suggesting that a reasonable continuation would be that right now we commit these acts of self-destruction, like we overeat or we drink or we stay up late, we miss our bedtime. And these things increase our chance of death, they increase our speed of aging, and they increase, probability of disease. And it's kind of insane as an intelligent species that we would willingly do things that would shorten our life or cause death. And we justify it. We say, well, we live only once, so live fast, die young. So we have all these really pretty stories and justifications, but they fall short in the context of where the future's at. And so I basically said, I'm going to say any action that I take that increases my speed of aging, I'm going to label as an act of violence, and I'm going to shift it. And so I'm trying to basically model out what is the future of being human, and I'm trying to live that. If we try to explain the future in like Blade Runner, you go to 2049, you see flying cars, you see droids, but humans are identical. They have the same thought processes, they have the same minds, they have the same tics, they're the same, playing the same games. And they do that because it's the only way to relate a human to another human watching the movie in the early 21st century. And what I'm trying to say is we need models of the future of being human. And I'm trying to show that tangibly so that we can start being the evolution that we imagine.
Yeah, I mean, the last thing I'll say is, I think a lot of time, you asked me, what does it look like from the outside? And what I think is fascinating is now being on the inside and walking around your house and chatting with you. And we even used some of your equipment.
Yeah.
I put it on and it's 20,000 sit-ups in, 30 minutes, and it's kind of scary and it makes these movements and shocks you. And as we were sitting there talking while I'm on it, I'm like, this is actually not very bad. In fact, it's like nothing, really. And then, we used it for one on the pelvic floor. And then you were talking about another device you had. And I suppose what I realized sort of sitting here that I think is hard for people to imagine if they haven't touched it is that your life doesn't seem miserable at all. I think people sometimes see your protocol and they think there must be no freedom within this. Yeah. And yet, this is a lot of freedom, actually. I think you're modeling the future of humanity and getting people to shift their mentality by maybe the next stage is also showing them there is so much joy here. I mean, your kids are adorable. Perhaps it doesn't actually have to be that foreign. So I think it's really cool what you're doing.
Yeah, thanks. I would say that I was a slave to my former self. I was a slave to the need for dopamine. I was a slave to the need of my impulses. I was a slave to my emotional needs. I was absolutely in a terrible situation. And I am now more free than I ever have been in my entire life. And I think most people, when they think about it, are in fact slaves to their current selves. And that's uncomfortable. And so they tell pretty stories about this being the way that this is living their best life or whatever. But the human condition by default is being a slave to self, to your emotions, to your thoughts, to your surroundings. And we've built a society of addiction. And so I've finally, for the first time in my life, I've escaped it. In my mind, in my addictions, in society, superimposing its will upon me, whether it be algorithms or food or junk food or whatever the case may be. So yeah, I'm as free as I've ever been for the first time in my entire life.
Incredible. And what an idea that you actually don't have to be your thoughts, that you could be free from base desires continuously, and that you have, as you've talked about, the ability to be a sovereign human and an autonomous man. Pretty cool. So I love this part that Brian talked about, zeroth principle thinking. And I basically said to him at the end of the interview, I was like, man, this has me thinking that there's so much I should be doing that's bigger and that I'm actually playing a little small in some ways. And I was like, but I don't know what to do about that. You know, you're talking about like existential crises of humanity and expanding human consciousness. And I'm over here like trying to do another deal, trying to hire better, trying to, be better as a wife. And he's like, let me give you a framework. And this framework was really impactful for me. So I hope it is for you too. He goes, draw a box like this. And inside this box, I want you to go around and I want you to talk to a bunch of different people, as many as you can, about what they are doing for work or career or purpose and why they are doing it. So what do you do for work? I'm an accountant. Why? Because I want to make money for my family. Okay, you write that into the box. And then he goes, if you want to be a zeroth principle thinking, anything that's inside of the box you can't do. You have to go to true blue ocean, what is outside of it. Can you do something that nobody else is talking about? Because that's where it's not competitive. And why I loved this is because in my business, at least right now, I'm thinking in lots of different ways. God, I just feel like we're hand-to-hand combat. We're just like fighting against all these other people who are trying to do something just like us. They copied us in some way. And then now they're like little ankle biters at me. And if you guys have felt like that too, it's really hard. The famous saying is, the only thing that you know for sure in a knife fight is that you're both going to get cut. And sometimes that's what it feels like when you're working inside of the box. I want to double click on trolls here for a second with Brian. So he gets crazy hate on the internet, like incredible amounts of hate. People call him a cult leader. They say horrible things about him and his son. I mean, stuff that I can't even imagine. And, I looked up at him and I was like, kind of seems like you like the hate. It seems like you like the trolls a little bit. And he kind of looked back at me and he's very calm and zen-like. And he said, well, better than being irrelevant. He's like, much better to be known and thought after than ignored. And I thought about that for a second because he said it sort of flippantly and very calm. And it reminded me of this famous Ted Turner quote, which is, he said about the press, you can say any negative thing you want to say about me, but make sure you spell my name right. And there's just an energy there that I think is worth taking home with this idea that if you're going to do anything interesting, people are probably going to troll you. And Brian has famously said many times, I don't care about what anybody thinks about me in the 21st century. I care about what the 25th century thinks about the actions that I am taking today. Could you even imagine a reframe better than that? Like the next time somebody is trolling you, the next time somebody says something hateful, the next time somebody says you can't, imagine not even caring what they think, but not caring what anybody who is alive today thinks, because maybe this entire generation doesn't understand where you're trying to go. That would be incredibly freeing, wouldn't it? I'm going to try it. Let's talk about what I'm calling the deal of the week, or gangster marketing moves by Brian. First of all, the guy's kind of a marketing genius, which I think makes sense given he made a bunch of money before doing all this. Case in point number one. He started this idea of zeroth principle thinking. And so he created sort of a whole new terminology. And what does he do to really hammer that home? He changes his name on Twitter, or X now, to Zero. So of course, that's going to have people asking about it and remembering it nonstop. He also has a link to a site where he explains zeroth principle thinking. And what does that do? It allows him to immediately say that anybody who doesn't understand what he's doing is not operating from the degree of principle that he is. Really, really smart. Also, I remember like in the beginning thinking, this guy is naked on the internet a lot. Like he's like naked with kettlebells in a garage with like a forest in the background. And I remember thinking that's weird or like different. And then I realized what he would do. He would kind of come up with this like, campaign that the New York Times would pick up, and then he would launch a product afterwards. It's kind of the Kardashian effect, essentially. They knew that to draft off the cultural conversation meant they could go viral with one thing, and then with all the virality getting pushed at them, they would sell something. And I think that's exactly what Brian is doing. He's selling ideas and also products. In fact, because he was getting so much hate on the internet, he launched an olive oil company because he thinks that the delivery of olive oil is really important if it's done a particular way. And so he had an olive oil called Blueprint. People started calling it snake oil. What did he do? He changed the name of the company to Snake Oil. Brilliant marketing play where he plays directly into the hate that he's getting as opposed to bowing down to it. Another person that's incredible at this that nobody likes to give credit to is Trump. He would often say something ridiculous and then allow that to become a platform for him to hold the megaphone as opposed to somebody else. Really, really smart. That's why I think Brian might be the Twitter gangster marketer of our time. Brian did not start out as a genius. In his mind, when we were walking around and I was looking at all the books that filled his shelves, I said, have you always just been really smart? And he said, no. In fact, I was super challenged in school. I didn't get good grades. I struggled a lot. I found it sort of insufferable. And, I didn't score well on standardized tests. So I have no idea if my IQ is high or low, but he's like, I wouldn't be surprised if it's super normal. And I think that should be freeing because look at what this guy has been able to do despite sucking at school and potentially not having some off the charts IQ. I then asked him, well, are you really good at math? And he said, no, I'm not good at math. I'm like very average at math, which I just sort of assumed like guy builds fintech company, sells for almost $1 billion. Now is like spending $2 million a year on changing the world and all these complex systems. He must be brilliant. And his take is actually different. He was like, no, I actually am not sure that I'm smart. He's like, in fact, I think it's really hard for me to process information. I have to actually rearrange it in a way that my brain fits. And he's like, and I'm okay with that, but it isn't like I very easily process things. And there's a lot of freedom in that. And then lastly, he showed us his penis clip that he measures his erections with at night, which, I was like, Brian, I'm not touching that piece of equipment. He jokingly, was like, I know, of course. As he was talking about it, what came to me was that he is really trying to alter this puritanical viewpoint that I think that we have, that our conversations around sex and our, different anatomical parts has to be sexualized as opposed to just measured. And so I don't actually think that he's doing anything that crazy. He's just normalizing a conversation that we have historically not allowed or thought was normal or appropriate for people to be having. There's a lot of beauty and good in that, in taking the things that we gave away our power to. We gave away our power to talk about our anatomy to doctors and to the medical complex. We gave away our ability to measure ourselves to doctors and the pharmaceutical and medical complex. There's really nowhere where you can grab all of your historical medical data and put it all in one place in order to figure out how you are measured or marked at a human. And instead you go to the doctor and they go, yeah, you're kind of fine by these metrics. And instead he's taking that all back. And he's like, no, I'm going to measure it all and I'm going to figure out what is important. And I think there's something really beautiful in that, in becoming his own owner of his own body. And maybe we aren't really the owners of ours. And this channel, we obsess on one thing, which is how to get more ownership for each of us. And I hope you felt like I did a little bit more to that after this conversation.
Talking with Brian Johnson was insane. And I thought instead of having a deal this week, Brian Johnson is actually kind of the deal. So we're going to break down his business, all of the businesses that he's built, and then currently what is he working on today. So basically, Brian founded Braintree. Then he bought Venmo. Actually, you guys have all used that for only $26 million, which in the scheme of things, not that much. Grew it like crazy and processed 12 billion payments, then sold that bad boy as a combined entity for about $800 million, took home $300 million himself, and sort of walked away. Fascinating part about that, he then creates a $100 million fund, the OS fund, which invests in a bunch of technologies that now Brian's using to try to live forever. including a company called Kernel, which was a neurotech company, designed helmet. This one you can see here if you're watching. I played around with it yesterday. And his goal was basically to detect cognitive issues early. Then in 2021, he announced what's called the blueprint. I think we should walk people through the blueprint really quick. It's been all over the internet before, but Rachel, turns out you follow this guy and are all up in the blueprint. So walk them through what it is super high level really quickly.
The blueprint is his public science experiment, basically, to try to reverse his aging. He's about 45, or at least he was when this came out, I think. He's trying to reverse his aging to the age of 18, which is about the age that his son was when he started this. And he's doing this by basically spending I think it's $2 million a year on a bunch of different experiments. And this includes things like hundreds of tests, blood transfusions, no sex after 8 p.m. And obviously, most people would not be able to do this. So he's trying to take it all on for himself. And he's documenting this entire thing over on YouTube, on a blog. And he's kind of teaching people the ways in hopes of making himself age backwards.
Yeah, he has this wild lab that's in his house. And so you'll see on the interwebs that I played around with it. There's one that you sit on. It tightens your pelvic floor and your rectum.
Oh
and so
my God.
You sit on this stool and it pulsates. And
Are you saying you did Kegel exercises with Brian Johnson?
I did. And I was like, Brian, the thing is, am I about to orgasm in front of you and my employee? Because I'm going to feel weird about that. And he was like, it's highly unlikely. And I was like,
that is great. Wait, so why does he have?
Well, he has a whole lab because, a couple things that's interesting that I had never thought about before is he says that, I'm going to paraphrase, so sorry, Brian, if I get this wrong, but basically that the longer you can delay your inability to procreate, the longer you can live, which makes sense. As long as you can continue to procreate, the human body wants to stay intact, delay cellular degeneration, etc. And so your pelvic floor and your rectum, I guess, are important for that. And so you sit on it and it zaps you. And so he's like, you're going to want to move around. So I'm like,
Oh my God, that cracks. So is this something that is scientifically backed?
I haven't checked the science on this. Somebody should. I'm sure it's all over Brian Johnson's thing, but I used it and it wasn't that painful. He's like, I'm on this when I'm on meetings. I'm like, I'm dying. Could you imagine him on Zoom just getting rectally zapped every 7 seconds?
That's gotta, I can't say what I was going to say.
Then I did his machine that you put on your abs that does 20,000 sit-ups in 30 minutes.
Is that real? I feel like that was a big thing in the 80s or something like that. You remember when it, I don't know. I feel
Dude,
like
I
saw
tried to do it here in
infomercials.
Austin. A friend of mine told me that it worked for her and I went and signed up for it and it was $3,000 for three sessions. I'm like, I better walk out with an 8-pack or I want a refund. And I didn't walk out with an 8-pack, but he does it 3 days a week and he's got abs. So I don't know. It could work. What else did I see that he has there? He has sort of a famous breakfast with mushrooms and this nutty pudding and stuff that he does.
Did you try it?
That he I didn't try the nutty pudding because I don't know. I felt rude. You don't want to go to his house. You're like, the thing is yuck. So the Latina in me couldn't let that happen. But then also, he's like, do you want to see my erection measuring device? And I was like, yes, I do.
Obviously. You're whip it out. Let's see it.
Yes, I do. I was like, but I do not want to touch that one, Brian. He was like, obviously.
Is that just a life vest that he wears for his penis?
How could that be a life
I don't know, a little mini life vest. I was reading a Time magazine
just
article.
floats it up?
Yeah. I was reading the Time magazine article and that's how they described it. And now I want to know. She didn't show any images.
I know.
Yeah.
I think I have some video of it. No, basically it looks like a little, I don't know, like a Lego with a string on it. And
so it's not
penis,
like an Aura ring?
No.
Oh.
No, and you just kind of the string goes on it and then it measures something. A life vest.
We're going to keep that. We're going to keep the conversation moving.
Seems happy. And I asked him if he was happy. He said he was happy, happier than he's ever been. But what I think is really interesting is this regime. I mean, when I told my parents about this, maybe you guys can relate, they were they had a visceral reaction to Brian Johnson. It was like, why would he live like this? Why would he do this? I just want to live my life. That's so weird. They're kind of making fun. They'd be pissed if I heard this, so I hope they don't listen. But I get why, because I think Brian Johnson is putting in people's face their bad decisions every day. And if he's right, then I don't know, 60% of the decisions we make every day are slowly killing us. And that's actually really hard to take in, right? And especially with a statement like every thing that lessens my life is an act of violence against my body. Well, what he's basically then saying, and that I think people could take that way, is, well, you are committing acts against your body that are violent nonstop. And so I see why people get so visceral of reaction against him. But it honestly surprised me because I don't think my parents are internet trolls, but they were not into it. You know, they were freaked out about it.
Well, nobody wants to be wrong.
Nobody wants to be wrong. And, you know, I think if deep down inside, you know the things that you shouldn't be doing for your health. I know the things I shouldn't be doing for my health. And we're choosing to do them or not do them anyway. And we can like write a story to ourselves about why that is. You know, you eat the Cheetos, you have the drinks, you do whatever because, you know, you only live once. YOLO, right? But there's also another side to it. And I think it's wild the amount of willpower this guy has. The other thing that's cool, you know, then my parents were like, well, he's probably trying to, you know, make money or build a business. I'm like, first of all, I don't have $300 million hanging around. But if I did, it'd probably be sufficient. And so, like, it's not like the guy needed to go out and have a new side hustle of like getting berated on the internet. He was already pretty famous and rich, so I don't think that was necessary. But it is wild, the businesses that he's creating, right? Like we were talking about them. So he's got an olive oil company that he changed the name to Snake Oil, wink, wink, and takes every day. He's got now 11 new products. I actually talked to him. I sent him a picture of my grandma, who's 99. It was like, she's still motoring, but we should get her on the protocol. And he's like, I'll pay for her to be on the protocol. He's like, we could document it. I'm like, yeah, but what if I kill grandma? Which like kind of freaks me out. So I don't know about that.
So if grandma's been like run over by a reindeer, it's like grandma's been murdered by a biohacker.
Yeah.
Well, I heard he doesn't like to be called a biohacker.
That will be the YouTube title for this podcast. Then obviously he has a ton of different products that I think he could come out with in the future because he's got this wild media empire. You know, people give us a hard time for being on the internet, right? Like, why would you do this if you had all this wealth? Why would you tell other people how to buy businesses if you already bought businesses? But he's sort of the same way. I mean, I think you followed a little bit what he's doing on YouTube and with the Don't Die meetings. Is there anything there that you think is interesting for people?
With all of his YouTube videos? Yeah. I do. One thing that I really appreciate is that he documented another woman that's also doing the blueprint with him, who I believe worked for him at one point, possibly, but she's fairly young. Something that I'm still kind of nervous about. I also am interested in this kind of stuff. I know I'm making a lot of fun right now, but I think anybody that's interested in health or the wellness space would be interested in him and has seen these videos before pop up. But I am a little nervous about only having one person kind of test himself and do this because I almost feel like I'm putting all my eggs in one basket when I'm taking the advice that he's giving because he's the only person that's getting A/B tested.
Yeah, it's a good point. Immediately when you say Brian Johnson and basket, I think of his Easter image. Have you seen that?
Yeah,
boy?
Just yeah. Speaking of,
good, by the way, with an Easter basket with a bunch of eggs in it, right where you could imagine. He's got a sense of humor, which I appreciate. But I think you're right. You know,
it's like him and that woman, and then I guess his son. So I will say, putting my eggs in three baskets. But that still
Plus
feels...
his dad. I think he's having his dad.
Oh, I didn't know
actually.
that.
Yeah. He transfused his blood. Is that the right word?
Yes, for his son, though, I thought.
No, into his dad.
Oh,
and
my gosh.
decreased his dad's age, too. But wouldn't that freak you out if your parents were like, the thing is...
Blood runs, what is it, thicker than water?
Yeah, it takes a whole new meaning. Yeah, but I thought that was wild. The other thing that I think is interesting about him is he realizes what we already know, which is that attention is the new economy. If he compared $300 million with hundreds of millions of views online, which he's doing with YouTube, with getting the next generation involved, he can create a cult-like movement. So he has these Don't Die meetings where he's had like 500 Don't Die meetings all around the world. People meet up all with the same idea of trying to increase longevity, which is actually really, really cool because another way to say it would be 500 meetings happen around the world with people who are interested in healthier living decisions, you know? And he just uses a catchy tagline that pisses people off because they're like, why do these people want to live forever? But all it really is, it's like, hey, what if we all tried to live a little bit healthier? You would think that would be a good thing for society. It's kind of backwards that we're so societally warped that we think that this is negative.
I think there are more people that are upset at the idea that living a lifestyle like him that would take away the enjoyment of life. I think that's what they're really mad about. Like, why would they don't think that it's worth living if you live a life that is like his, because to them that depletes them of joy. And I guess you can't really quantify how much somebody really values life without having certain things in it, you know?
Yeah. He has a quote too that I love that's something along the lines of freeing yourself from the prison of desires is like the ultimate happiness. And so I think his response would be a little bit Buddha-like, which would be, well, I just want less things. And because I want less things, I'm actually happier and I can be very happy and then have a long, healthy life. It's also wild because I asked him, I'm like, you seem very calm. I'm like, do you get mad very often? And he's like, not really. I'm like, do you get upset? You're like, when was the last time you yelled? And he's like, I can't remember. So I don't know. Part of us are just like, we're wired different. You know, I'm a really excitable Latina, so I don't think that would work for me. Now, the last thing I thought that was fascinating, I talked to Brian about where he's going with this business. And like, imagine him launching a health empire on the back of personal experiments where he has skin in the game. So you guys actually know, at least, you know, when you go to a doctor and the doctor is like fat, unhealthy, like divorced, and giving you health advice, sometimes I'm like, I don't know, man, what are you doing? And with this guy, at least, you know, he's doing it all, which I think has like perfect alignment. So I bet he built something giant. It kind of reminds me, I texted him, I was like, you know, you should look at what Gwyneth Paltrow did with Goop because it was similar. I mean, remember all that crap she got when she launched?
Yeah. I do feel like there could be a funny meme going around on the internet that's not made yet. That's like Goop girlfriend, Brian Johnson boyfriend.
Oh, this is good. Somebody make that. Tag us on that on Twitter. Also, like something with like remember when Gwyneth Paltrow talked about the golden yoni? Am I saying that right?
Is that the egg that she put somewhere? Yeah.
Put up your part as a
I'm
lady?
trying to see it. So I'm looking at olive oil over here on Goop's website, which is by Flamingo Estate, which is a really cool company. Flamingo Estate, I think, goes to like famous people's houses and will like say, hey, if you want to make honey and have bees on your property, we'll put it there and it's like better for your property and we'll sell the honey and say like, oh, it's Gwyneth Paltrow's honey or whatever. So Flamingo Estate, kind of cool company. Goop sells Flamingo Estate olive oil. It is $85. How much do you think Blueprint olive oil costs?
$60.
Okay, let's look. Do you already know this?
No, I'm guessing.
Okay. $60, yeah. Okay.
I actually swear I didn't know that.
Yeah,
but I should have asked him. Yeah, so I think there's something there. I think he could create the tech bro Goop of our age, or even just think about it. What's the healthy dudes company? Like, I don't know that exists. I mean, healthy rich chicks is probably Goop, right? Healthy, like mid-market moms is Jessica Alba, whatever that company is called. Honest. Okay, I'm thinking just whenever I think of guy health, I think of Equinox. I think
that's a gym chain.
And that's also like multi-gender.
That's true. I just feel like whenever I hear people talking about it openly a lot, it's Matt.
Yeah. Anyway, I think there's a play there. I don't know what the revenue Gwyneth does now at Goop, but I would imagine it's pretty sizable. And she's really mainstreamed a bunch of stuff that was not mainstreamed prior. I mean, you could give her crap for how expensive some of the stuff is, but like, don't buy it. Go buy a cheaper version somewhere else. And you pay a premium for sort of the content, the knowledge, the luxe version of it.
The last thing I want to talk about, I guess, is I'm interested to see if he comes out with a specific piece of hardware that is something that a consumer that, like myself, would buy. Like, I wear an Oura ring. It was wildly expensive, but it was still something that like I saved up for. I asked for part of the money for Christmas. I chipped in half. Like, I was like, this is something like almost, I thought of it like a non-negotiable piece of health tech. I really like it. I've had it for quite a few years. It rocks for me. But I could see him like making something like an Oura ring that I could lift in or something.
Yeah.
Would be nice.
I want whatever the machine was that I did. You know, do you know how hard it is as a woman to like get a 6-pack or to get just tighter here? My husband just stops looking at soda, gets skinny. I could run 400 miles every day and not get a 6-pack. So I don't know. If Ryan Johnson is listening, I think the shout out would be, yeah, we want to live longer, but we also want to be hot. So can we have both?
Like an inside of his medicine cabinet tour, like a Vogue style tour.
Oh, I saw it. It's just a lot of pills.
He doesn't give anything that's like this is my like super good, like, I don't know. I imagine he's like serums and stuff. Like, I want him to like goopify himself. Like, honestly, Gwyneth needs to go to his house.
Look nice.
It does. He does look like he dyes his hair.
Didn't ask. I could have added that to the repertoire.
I could also see him making a wellness club where you have all those so Remedy Place, I think, is a wellness club chain. He should make like a wellness club where you can go meet other people that are interested in
the Blueprint,
not dying. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And, you know, maybe for a premium price, like how much is Equinox? Like $250 a month or something?
Yeah, something like that. The moral of the story, I think, is, again, what I hope you took away from Brian Johnson is play bigger games, wild ideas about the fact that, You know, can you even imagine a mind in which you decide that your entire mission is going to be not to die, and the belief system you have to have locked in to determine that you might even be able to beat like the ultimate thing that beats all humans? And I think that's pretty powerful. And so I like listening to the crazy ones, people like Brian Johnson, who've built something, done it again, and then trying it at an even bigger level. Really, really cool. Thanks for being builders. I see you all, and you are a big deal to me. We'll see you next week. Oh, and if you haven't subscribed and reviewed the podcast, please do. That's how this thing grows. Appreciate all you guys.
Say that I have, you know that I got it, no need to look all in the bag.